They say money can't buy happiness, but in a world overrun by vengeful spirits, it's the only thing that can buy your life. So our protagonist Chen Mu, to escape from his dog-shit life, decided to rob the Nether Bank. However, everything did not go as he planned. After robbing the bank, all the vengeful spirits started chasing him. He ran as fast as he could to escape, sweat dripping down his face as he ran. Just as he was looking away, too scared to look back, a glowing red projection appeared ahead of him, warning him to turn left and not jump out of the window, reminding him to obey the rules. He glared at it with frustration and shouted that he had already robbed a bank. What rules was he supposed to follow now? Behind him, several pursuers burst into the corridor. They shouted for him to stop as they chased him. He glanced back and saw them closing the distance. He gritted his teeth and muttered that they were catching up. The hallway ahead split into empty rooms, but he kept running, telling himself he couldn't worry about anything else anymore. A window flashed into view. Without hesitation, he leapt straight through it. Glass shattered as he dove out of the building, falling toward the ground below. He landed hard but steady. His body trembled from the impact. Then he lifted his head and breathed out in relief, saying that he made it. But just as he felt relieved, a punch smashed into him before he could react. His body twisted from the impact, and he cried out in pain as shards of glass scattered everywhere. Blood sprayed from his mouth as he was thrown backward. He crashed hard onto the ground outside, skidding across the street with a heavy thud. A cold voice echoed from behind him. It said that any human who violated the rules had only one fate: death. Chen Mu clutched his chest, struggling to breathe. His expression tightened as he forced out a frustrated whisper. He remembered that he had struggled through 5 years of the apocalypse since the weird had descended. He had always been cautious, hiding whenever he could, but in the end, even he was driven into a dead corner by the ghosts. Although ghosts were terrifying, they loved money just like humans did, specifically ghost coins. To escape this brutal life, he decided to take a risky gamble. Using an epic tier spatial ring he had obtained earlier, he chose to rob the Nether Bank. While trying to escape, he became cornered. He violated the rules, and in the end, he failed. As darkness surrounded him and he sank deeper, he whispered that he wasn't resigned to this. His body kept falling through the void. He reached out, his eyes wide with refusal, and cried out that he really couldn't accept this. Just then, a bright flash erupted from Chen Mu's spatial ring. Everything around him turned pitch black. The next moment, he opened his eyes and found himself inside a classroom, lying face down on a desk. His eyes suddenly snapped open, and he lifted his head in shock. He slowly rose from his seat, staring at his own hands and the familiar classroom around him, and wondered if he had been reborn. Meanwhile, students whispered nearby. One boy leaned forward and whispered urgently that a weird scenario had already appeared in their city. Another explained that anyone who violated the rules would face severe punishment, maybe losing an arm or a leg if they were lucky, their life if they weren't. Chen Mu froze, his eyes narrowing. A weird scenario appeared. His thoughts trembled. He wondered if he had returned to the exact moment when the weird apocalypse first began. A bead of sweat rolled down his cheek as his expression tightened. He wondered if he had to relive those terrifying days all over again. Just as he was thinking, Chen Mu suddenly jerked his head up and noticed that the spatial ring he had gotten in his previous life had also come back with him. And not just that, all the ghost coins from the Nether Bank he robbed were actually still inside. A slow smile spread across his face. Relief and excitement filled him as he realized that with this much money in this life, he could finally pull off something big. He lowered his gaze, thinking back to his past life. If he remembered correctly, around this exact time, Jiang City's first weird scenario was just about to appear at their school. Just then, a crimson light burst open in the classroom, forming a blood-red frame in the air. Inside it, a pale skull with octopus-like tentacles appeared, dripping dark liquid onto the floor. The floating message announced that the weird mission called Midnight Cafeteria was about to begin. The students froze as the red glow spread across the room. A girl stepped back in terror. Her eyes widened and she screamed, asking what the strange object in front of her was. The same skull emblem hovered near her chest, releasing another glowing red panel filled with distorted text. Another announcement formed above all the students. It stated that the chosen participants were to become waiters for the Midnight Cafeteria. It ordered them to reach the cafeteria before midnight, warning that lateness would not be forgiven. A final message repeated that the mission location must be reached before the clock struck 12. At another desk, a girl in a red dress stared at the red frame near her hands, her face twisted in fear as she shouted that it was a weird mission. Sudden shouting echoed from the hallway. Students rushed through the corridor shouting for help. Several boys ran at full speed, their expressions pale and filled with panic. One student yelled for everyone to run as the red glow continued to thicken around the school. Meanwhile, Chen Mu walked forward. He stopped beside a girl who sat trembling over her desk. Tears streamed down her face as her shoulders shook. She cried out that she didn't want to die yet, and begged to know if she could avoid going. Chen Mu looked down at her calmly. He advised her to follow the rules. He explained that although entering a weird scenario was dangerous, there was still a small chance of survival. He warned her that anyone who arrived late would be erased immediately. The girl stared up at him in silence, frozen and shaking. Chen Mu left the classroom and walked through the hallways as the red light pulsed over the walls. He remembered that this particular midnight cafeteria was considered a blue-chip stock among weird missions, something extremely valuable later on. A faint smile curved across his lips. He stated that conquering the apocalypse would start by buying it. Meanwhile, the message declared that midnight was approaching. Any waiter who was late would be erased. The countdown began, followed by the command to commence erasure. Two students sprinted desperately toward the mission location. Panic filled their faces as one of them screamed in fear. The scene shifted to the front of the cafeteria building, drenched in red light. Black crows circled above as a small group of students gathered at the entrance. They stood silently beneath the ominous glow. One girl let out a shaky breath, saying it was so scary. The others watched the entrance with tense expressions. Suddenly, the red-haired girl reached out toward Chen Mu, as if trying to cling to him. Chen Mu slapped her hand away in an instant, pushing her back. He asked her who she was. His expression stayed firm as he warned her not to try latching onto him. The red-haired girl's face flushed with anger. She clenched her fists, shaking as she tried to respond. Just then, a violent burst of red energy exploded inside the cafeteria entrance. A commanding voice cut through the air, ordering silence. From the glowing vortex, a woman in a black suit and skirt rose into view. She introduced herself as the manager of the midnight cafeteria and announced that there were 3 rules. The first rule: anyone who came to spend inside the cafeteria was a distinguished guest. All staff had to satisfy the guest's demands unconditionally, even her own. The second rule: if any player damaged any cafeteria items, they would be punished. The third rule: leaving the cafeteria during working hours was not allowed. After explaining the rules, the manager took all the players inside the cafeteria. The group of students stood together as the doors closed behind them. The manager stepped forward and spoke politely to the hidden figure at the table, apologizing for the wait and addressing him as a distinguished guest. A harsh voice came from the shadows, asking what they were dawdling for. He shouted for them to hurry up and come over. One of the girls gasped in fear. She trembled as she let out a sharp scream. Her panicked cry echoed again, louder this time. The manager snapped at her, yelling for her to shut up. The girl quickly covered her mouth, shaking as she stepped back. The manager bowed apologetically toward the unseen guest. She said she was sorry and promised to handle the situation immediately. 2 suited staff members moved in from behind and grabbed the frightened girl by the arms. The manager pointed forward and ordered them to take her away. The 2 staff members answered at once, agreeing to the command. The man with spiked hair narrowed his red eyes and gave the next order. He told them to serve the dishes. A moment later, a row of strange steaming dishes was placed on the floor. Chen Mu and the others stood around them as a girl told the distinguished guest to enjoy his meal. The spiked-hair guest leaned forward and bit into a purple, slime-covered creature. Green liquid dripped from his teeth as he chewed loudly. The red-haired girl covered her mouth, disgusted. She asked what he was eating and said it looked disgusting. Tears formed in her eyes as she turned away, trying not to vomit. The guest pointed at her with a wide grin. He ordered her to come over and wipe his mouth clean. The girl froze. She shook her head and whispered that she didn't want to. The red-haired girl grabbed Chen Mu's sleeve in a panic. She pleaded with him, shouting for him to hurry up and help her. Chen Mu glanced sideways at her. He asked why he should go, reminding her that the monster had called her, not him. Frustration twisted across her face. She clenched her teeth and cursed under her breath. A moment later, she forced herself to step toward the guest. Her hands trembled as she held up a cloth. She asked if what she was doing was okay. The spiked-hair guest leaned back with a pleased expression. He handed her a ghostly purple bill and said she had done very well. He told her that the money was her tip. The girl stared at the bill in surprise, lifting it with both hands. A smile slowly formed on her face as she asked if it was really for her. 2 girls stood beside her. One of them leaned forward in surprise and shouted that the bill was actually ghost coins. The girl in the school uniform explained that ghost coins were extremely precious. She said they were valuable enough to make the weird show mercy. The green-haired girl added another story. She said she had heard a tycoon once spent $1 million just to buy 10 ghost coins. She pointed upward with a proud expression. She said she didn't expect this ghostly customer to casually give out 10 ghost coins as a tip. The red-haired girl turned toward Chen Mu with a smug smile. She told him it was a good thing she didn't let him take the opportunity. He must be dying of regret now. Across the room, the spiked-hair guest finished eating. He tapped the empty plate and asked them to take it away. The girl quickly stepped forward, smiling as she lifted the plate and told the guest there was no problem at all. As the red-haired girl carried the empty plate away, a foot suddenly hooked around her ankle. Her heel slipped out of balance and she fell to the ground. She hit the floor hard, sliding across the tiles. Shock filled her eyes as she looked back toward the table. The spiked-hair guest leaned forward with a mocking grin. He told her she was clumsy and ordered her to pay up. The girl pushed herself up, furious. She pointed at him and shouted that he had tripped her on purpose. She tried to stand, but a pale hand grabbed her arm and pulled her back. Her eyes widened in fear as she froze. The manager appeared beside her, standing tall in her black suit. She spoke calmly, saying that even if a customer made things difficult, the rules remained the rules. The girl trembled, clutching her arm. She stammered that she would pay. She said she would use the ghost coins to pay for the broken plate. The manager stared down at her, eyes glowing coldly. She asked if the girl was truly sure about making compensation. The girl swallowed hard and nodded. She repeated that she was sure. As she lifted the glowing bill in her hand, Chen Mu stepped toward her. He told her she was foolish, saying she had just given up her last chance of survival. According to him, leaving this place alive was now impossible. The girl snapped back at him, saying he was talking nonsense. She argued that she had already paid. The manager raised the bill between her fingers. She explained calmly that the price of a single plate in this cafeteria was 20 ghost coins. The money the girl offered was not enough. Shock spread across the girl's face. She protested loudly, saying the bill in her hand could be exchanged for $1 million outside. How could it not pay for one plate? The manager leaned in with a sharp smile. She told the girl that human money meant nothing here. The ghost cafeteria did not care for the currency used by humans. She leaned forward with a twisted smile and asked how she should punish the red-haired girl. The girl trembled violently, clutching her chest. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes as a single thought shook through her mind. She didn't want to die. Her fear filled the room and the spiky-haired man burst into loud laughter. He held his stomach as he laughed, saying that watching humans show fear was truly interesting. He turned toward the others and wondered aloud who should serve him next. Two girls immediately panicked, stepping back and shouting not to pick them. The spiky-haired man's attention shifted to Chen Mu, who stood calmly with his arms folded. With a grin, he asked Chen Mu if he wasn't afraid. Chen Mu looked back at him without flinching. He asked why he should be afraid. The spiky-haired man slapped a bill onto the plate in front of him and told him to hurry over and take the plate away, promising that the 10 ghost coins would be his. From behind Chen Mu, one of the girls stepped forward in fear. She begged him not to go, warning that the man only wanted to harm him. Chen Mu glanced back at her calmly. He told her not to worry, saying he had his own ways of dealing with things. He then walked up to the table where the spiky-haired man waited. Chen Mu took the banknote and asked if he simply had to carry the plate. Right after he took the money from him, Chen Mu picked up the plate and smashed it into the ground. Pieces scattered across the floor. Seeing this, everyone in the room froze. The red-haired woman, the blonde manager, the two frightened girls, and the spiky-haired man all stared in shock. Chen Mu looked forward with a calm expression. He told them not to waste time and said they should move on to the next step. The red-haired woman burst into wild laughter. She told him his money wasn't enough to compensate for anything, and she ordered him to prepare to die. The blonde manager stepped forward next. She glared at Chen Mu and said he had damaged an item, so he must either pay or die. Chen Mu didn't react. Instead, he casually told her not to rush and asked her to serve him a portion of peanuts worth 10 ghost coins, adding that he would eat them right there. The blonde manager froze, confused. She stared at the ghost coin he was holding and asked what he meant. Chen Mu then explained the cafeteria rules with a confident smile. He said that as long as someone spent money, they became a customer. He reminded her that cafeteria staff were not allowed to refuse a customer's request. Finally, he pointed at himself and declared that he chose to become a customer, and he refused to make compensation. The blonde manager clasped her hands together with a delighted smile. She praised Chen Mu, calling him a truly clever customer. She stepped closer and asked politely if she could know his name. Chen Mu remained calm. He said she was flattering him and introduced himself as Chen Mu. Before she could continue, the red-haired woman rushed forward angrily. She pointed at Chen Mu and shouted, demanding to know why they weren't killing him too. She argued loudly that he had also smashed a plate. The blonde manager turned toward her with a firm expression. She explained that the woman still didn't understand the situation. She said that Mr. Chen Mu had already used the rules to find the method to clear the stage. The red-haired woman froze, shocked, and shouted in disbelief. She suddenly raised her hand and yelled that she also wanted to spend money. She said she wanted to become a customer too. The blonde manager didn't hesitate. She reminded the woman that she had already confirmed her choice earlier. There was no second chance. The red-haired woman froze, stunned. Her eyes widened as she whispered in disbelief, asking how this could be happening. The blonde manager then turned back to Chen Mu with a respectful tone. She asked if Mr. Chen Mu had any other requests. Chen Mu looked calm. He said he wanted her to call out the boss of the cafeteria for him. A moment later, the scene shifted. Chen Mu pointed ahead confidently and made his bold request clear. He said he wanted to buy the entire cafeteria. Everyone around him, the girls in school uniforms and the two women standing nearby, stared at him in shock. The blonde manager's eyes widened in shock. She asked Chen Mu if he was serious. She explained that although the cafeteria's revenue had recently dropped, buying it would still cost several million ghost coins. Chen Mu answered calmly. He said he wasn't joking, and that as long as she helped him find the boss, everything would proceed. Then he held out a thick stack of bills and said it was her tip. The manager froze, stunned. She gasped when she realized the amount. She shouted that it was 30,000 ghost coins. Her reaction drew the attention of everyone nearby. The red-haired woman and a strange-looking man both yelled in disbelief. The manager trembled as she stared at the money. She said that amount was equal to 2 years of her salary. A grin spread across her face as she held the stack tightly. She whispered that Chen Mu was actually a hidden big shot. The red-haired woman stormed up to Chen Mu in frustration. She shouted at him, asking why he hadn't helped her earlier if he had so much money. Chen Mu looked at her calmly. He told her they weren't related in any way, and there was no reason for him to pay for her mistakes. Before she could argue, the blonde manager stepped forward respectfully. She told Chen Mu to wait a moment, saying she would call the boss right away. Chen Mu nodded with a relaxed smile. He said there was no problem and that he would wait right there. As he smiled, the blonde manager turned toward the red-haired woman. Her expression darkened. She told the woman she had violated the rules and must accept the punishment. The red-haired woman froze, fear rising in her eyes. She reached out desperately toward Chen Mu. Her voice shook as she cried out, saying she had been wrong. Chen Mu stood still, watching her without emotion. She collapsed to the ground, dragging herself forward on her elbows. Tears streamed down her face as she screamed that she didn't want to die. She begged him to save her. The blonde manager grabbed her by the arm. The woman continued screaming for help as she was dragged away across the floor. The manager's red eyes glowed with cold amusement while pulling her toward the back. A moment later, the spiky-haired man stepped up beside Chen Mu. He forced a nervous smile and called Chen Mu Big Brother. He asked him not to take what had happened earlier too seriously, explaining awkwardly that he had simply drunk too much. Chen Mu turned toward him with a sharp expression. Without hesitation, he told him to get lost. The spiky-haired man trembled as he backed away from Chen Mu. He repeated nervously that there was no problem, nodding over and over. In a panic, he turned and ran toward the exit. He shouted that he was leaving right away. A girl near the doorway stepped aside in shock as he sprinted past her. Chen Mu watched him go, then turned to the two girls nearby. He calmly ordered them to sit down. Both girls froze, startled. They quietly took their seats at the table. Confused, they wondered why they were acting so tense when they were supposed to be on an extremely dangerous, weird mission. The two girls exchanged uneasy looks. One of them whispered that the entire atmosphere seemed to change whenever it involved Chen Mu. Just then, the blonde manager looked up and called out to her boss. She introduced Chen Mu. A dark figure with sharp eyes and a twisted smile stepped out from the swirling red mist. He looked directly at Chen Mu and spoke chillingly, asking if he was the one who wanted to buy his midnight cafeteria. Chen Mu faced the boss without hesitation. He confirmed calmly that he was indeed the one who wanted to buy the cafeteria. The boss stepped back with a confident grin, his tone smooth and calculating. He told Chen Mu that he had a sharp eye, saying he should be able to see the cafeteria's value as well. Although the Midnight Cafeteria's revenue had dropped recently, its scale and location were still unmatched. Chen Mu listened quietly, then nodded. He agreed, saying he was also very optimistic about the cafeteria's future development. At that moment, a thought stirred in Chen Mu's mind. He remembered his past life. Back then, the Midnight Cafeteria had struggled early on, but later, it suddenly rose to become one of the top hotels in the entire weird world. Chen Mu's expression hardened with determination. He understood the opportunity standing in front of him. This time he planned to seize it early, before anyone else could. The boss smirked to himself, thinking how fortunate he was that someone was finally willing to take over the troublesome cafeteria. He told himself he shouldn't let this opportunity slip away. Facing Chen Mu, the boss raised his voice and pretended to be serious. He said the selling price was quite expensive and wondered if Chen Mu could handle it. Chen Mu didn't hesitate. With a calm smile, he told the boss to name his price. Hearing that, the boss lifted one finger. He announced boldly that for 7 million ghost coins, the entire cafeteria would belong to Chen Mu. The blonde assistant leaned in nervously. She whispered that the boss was being a bit shady and questioned whether their cafeteria was really worth 7 million, telling him to look at Mr. Chen Mu's expression. Seeing Chen Mu's expression, the boss suddenly panicked. Cold sweat formed on his forehead as he wondered if he had asked for too much. Worried, the boss quickly tried to fix the situation. He told Chen Mu that if the price wasn't suitable, they could continue discussing it. Chen Mu opened his eyes and answered calmly. He said there was no need. Then, with a confident smile, he announced that he was offering 8 million and wanted to seal the deal immediately. The boss and the blonde assistant froze in shock. Both of them leaned forward with wide eyes. The boss stared at Chen Mu in disbelief and asked if he was joking. Chen Mu shook his head lightly. He said he was serious and that he had one condition for adding more money. The boss leaned forward eagerly, his eyes shining. He urged Chen Mu to speak, almost begging him to explain the condition. Chen Mu raised his hand and pointed toward the blonde manager. He stated firmly that all the staff members in the cafeteria must remain with him. He said the boss was not allowed to take any of them away. The blonde manager blinked in surprise. She asked if Chen Mu actually wanted to keep them. Before she could say more, the boss cut in with a careless attitude. He admitted openly that after selling the cafeteria, he had planned to run away. He laughed as he said he didn't care about these lonely souls and wandering ghosts, and this way, he wouldn't have to pay the wages he still owed them. Hearing this, the boss quickly changed his expression to a cheerful one. He promised there was no problem and agreed to leave all the employees to Chen Mu. With a greedy smile, he leaned forward again. He asked Chen Mu how long it would take to prepare the payment so they could sign the contract soon. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he waited for Chen Mu's answer. Chen Mu smiled confidently and raised his hand. He said they should complete the deal today because he preferred paying in cash. A moment later, Chen Mu revealed a massive pile of glowing ghost coins. Stacks of money filled the room, sparkling under the lights. The boss fell backward in shock as he stared at the mountain of cash. He looked around in disbelief, stunned that Chen Mu had just taken out 8 million so casually. Money fluttered in the air as the boss's eyes lit up greedily. He muttered to himself, amazed that Chen Mu could produce such a fortune without hesitation. The boss quickly placed a contract and pen on the table. He praised Chen Mu for being so straightforward in business and told him that once he signed, the cafeteria would officially be his. Chen Mu leaned over the document and began signing it. As he wrote his name and finished signing, a sudden purple glow surged from the contract. Energy wrapped around his hands, rising like flames. The boss waved happily, completely unfazed. He told Chen Mu not to worry. He explained that this was the power of the rules, and once the contract was signed, Chen Mu would become the official boss of the cafeteria. He added that no one including himself could forcibly take the cafeteria away after this. Chen Mu looked down at his hand as the light pulsed warmly. A smile formed on his face, and he said he could feel it. In the next moment, Chen Mu's mind connected with something deeper. He realized the cafeteria had formed a bond with him, just like the spatial ring, and from that day onward, the rules of the cafeteria would be set by him. Meanwhile, the former boss watched with a greedy grin. In his thoughts, he rejoiced that 8 million ghost coins had not only allowed him to sell off his failing cafeteria, but also freed him from worrying about the troublesome staff. Chen Mu's eyes shone with confidence. He thought to himself that spending 8 million now would secure a weird scenario worth tens of billions in the future. Chen Mu and the former boss shook hands with bright smiles. Together they declared that they had made a huge profit. Right after shaking hands, the former boss hurried toward the exit with a large sack slung over his shoulder. He waved his hands energetically and said there was no need to escort him out. He wished Chen Mu prosperous business and shouted that he was leaving now. Chen Mu watched him run away and then turned to the blonde manager. He said that now that he was the boss of the cafeteria, he wanted to modify the rules. The blonde manager smiled warmly. She told him there was no problem and that since he was the boss he could change the rules however he liked. Chen Mu looked at the clock on the wall and made a decision. He stated that the weird mission would end at 12:30. The blonde manager nodded with a smile, saying there was no problem. Chen Mu then turned to the two girls who had been trapped in the cafeteria earlier. He told them they could go back safely now. The girls stepped forward with relief. One of them thanked Chen Mu sincerely. She said that if it weren't for him they definitely wouldn't have been able to leave alive. Chen Mu then looked back at the blonde manager. He instructed her to gather all the staff because he wanted to hold a meeting in 10 minutes. The manager smiled brightly and nodded. 10 minutes later, all the cafeteria staff gathered together, chefs, servers and even a creature in a pink apron, standing in a line as Chen Mu faced them. Chen Mu introduced himself. He told them that their previous boss had sold both the cafeteria and all of them to him. The staff listened quietly as Chen Mu continued speaking. He announced that from that day onward he was the new person in charge. The group lowered their heads with dull expressions. One of them muttered that it didn't matter who the boss was. Another added that they were just beasts of burden anyway. Chen Mu looked at them and spoke firmly. He said he knew their former boss owed them half a year's wages, but he was different. Chen Mu stepped forward and placed his hand over the glowing stack of ghost coins. He announced that he would pay all the back wages and said Manager Lee would hand them out shortly. The bright purple light shimmered across the room, drawing every worker's attention. The staff crowded together, their eyes shining. One of them shouted excitedly that there were so many ghost coins. Another told him to stop yelling, saying he wasn't blind. Someone else whispered that it had to be at least hundreds of thousands. Chen Mu looked at the group and continued. He told them that as long as they kept working for him, he guaranteed their wages would always be paid on time every month. The staff burst into cheers. Some threw their fists into the air. One shouted how great it was. Another said he could finally save money to get a wife. Someone even shouted that Chen Mu was his god. Watching their reactions, Chen Mu smiled quietly. He thought to himself that such a small amount of money had earned him such deep gratitude. In his mind he noted that he should really thank the previous boss for leaving things in this state. Chen Mu waved goodbye to the cafeteria staff as he stepped outside. The workers stood together at the entrance, smiling and calling out, telling him to take care. As he walked away his expression became more serious. He thought about his situation. Even though clearing the midnight cafeteria had given him a boost from the scenario's power, his strength was still only at the ghost soldier tier. If he ran into a higher level weird, he knew he would not be able to escape death. Standing alone under the red-tinted sky, Chen Mu looked around the empty street. He told himself he needed to get some kind of life-saving equipment as soon as possible. Just then, a purple taxi suddenly pulled up beside him. He stared at it in surprise and wondered aloud how there could still be a taxi at such a late hour. The car door clicked as he reached out and pulled it open. Chen Mu leaned inside and spoke to the driver, telling him to go to Wangjiang Community. Chen Mu sat quietly in the back seat of the taxi as the car moved through the night. The interior was silent, but something about the atmosphere felt strange. The taxi suddenly accelerated. The speedometer needle shot upward, and the car rushed forward at an unusually fast pace. Chen Mu looked out the window, watching the scenery blur past. He wondered why the driver was going so fast when there were hardly any cars on the road at this hour. To him the speed felt excessive. As he sat there, he noticed another detail. It was the smell of blood. Chen Mu's expression sharpened. He looked toward the car door and spotted a red shape smeared across the window. It was a bloody handprint. Seeing it confirmed his suspicion that something was definitely wrong with this taxi. A cold thought crossed his mind. He realized he had unknowingly stepped into another mobile weird scenario. This time, it was the Nether Taxi, a mobile weird scenario known for dragging passengers into deadly situations. Inside the taxi, Chen Mu remained calm as he thought about the dangers humans faced in the weird apocalypse. He explained to himself that there were three major threats. First, he recalled the dangerous missions, scenarios like the Midnight Cafeteria. Anyone chosen for those missions had to struggle to survive and complete the task. Next came the second threat, malicious ghosts disguised as regular people. These ghosts acted normal on the surface but secretly lured unsuspecting humans into terrifying scenarios. Then came the third threat, the most dangerous of all. It was the kind where a person didn't even realize they had entered a weird scenario, like someone walking casually down an alley, completely unaware that the air around them was already twisting into something unnatural. By the time someone realized what was happening, it was usually already too late. By then, escape was impossible. Inside the taxi, Chen Mu remained composed. He recalled knowledge from his past life. He knew the rules of the nether taxi. As long as a passenger had enough ghost coins to pay the fare, they could leave safely. If someone had no money, they needed to jump out of the taxi before it began accelerating. But if someone was both careless and broke, and accidentally rode the nether taxi, they would end up becoming food for the ghost. Chen Mu's eyes sharpened. Despite the danger, he understood the benefits. He thought about how the roughest storms bring the best rewards. The nether taxi was incredibly fast and acted as a powerful mode of transportation. While inside it, passengers were also protected from other ghosts. A confident smile formed on Chen Mu's face as he considered the advantages. He looked out the window and thought to himself that he had to find a way to obtain this car. The nether taxi's value was simply too great to ignore. A moment later, the purple taxi sped through the night and arrived at its destination. A sign outside read Wangjian Community Entrance as the car drifted to a stop. Inside, the skeletal driver slowly turned his head, green eyes glowing. He told Chen Mu they had arrived and demanded the fare, 10,000 ghost coins. Chen Mu's eyes widened. He exclaimed that 10,000 was far too expensive. The skull-faced driver leaned closer, his voice turning cold and threatening. He warned that if Chen Mu didn't have money, then he shouldn't blame the driver for becoming nasty. Chen Mu sat calmly in the back seat, a faint smile forming as he studied the skeletal driver. He remarked that a driver who could race down the road at such incredible speed without eyes was truly worthy of being called a veteran. The skull-faced driver didn't appreciate the compliment. A cold light flickered in the hollow sockets as the bony finger pointed forward. The driver snapped angrily, demanding the fare and warning that anyone unable to pay should be prepared for death. Chen Mu didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted a hand with confidence, stopping the ghostly threat in its tracks. A single question escaped his lips. Who had claimed payment was impossible. In the next moment, a heavy bundle of glowing ghost coins slammed down on the seat with a sharp sound. Purple light burst outward from the stack, proving its authenticity. Chen Mu leaned back slightly, challenging the driver with calm certainty. He declared that the money was right there, and the only question remaining was whether the driver dared to accept it. The ghost driver stiffened. Beads of ghostly sweat traced down the cracked skull as disbelief spread across the bony face. The driver was stunned that this young passenger actually possessed 10,000 ghost coins. Finally, the skeletal driver spoke again, repeating the rules that governed the nether taxi. As long as the fare was paid in full, the passenger was guaranteed the right to leave safely. The skeletal driver sat stiffly as Chen Mu's voice continued. Chen Mu pointed out that the driver had deliberately shifted his body to block the taximeter, hiding the real fare. Because of that, the true price couldn't be seen, allowing the driver to quote a sky-high number meant to scare the passenger into panic. Chen Mu leaned back with a calm, confident smile. He explained that the driver had been certain no passenger would carry 10,000 ghost coins. If the passenger failed to pay, the driver could then justify devouring the victim without breaking the scenario's rules. Across the seat, the skeleton's expression turned uneasy. A silent thought echoed within the hollow skull. The apocalypse had only begun a month ago, yet this young human seemed to know every rule of the scenario as if memorized long ago. Chen Mu remarked that the driver truly had a black heart. The cost was obviously 10 ghost coins, yet the driver had tried to demand 10,000. The skeleton clicked his teeth together in annoyance. With a huff, he told the passenger to pay and leave, insisting there was no need for further chatter. Chen Mu held the glowing stack of ghost coins between his fingers, lifting it lightly as purple light shimmered across the taxi interior. He told the skeletal driver not to rush and asked if the ghost coins were tempting, if they were wanted. The skeleton's eyes locked onto the shining bills. A faint tremble ran through the bony jaw as the driver asked whether those coins would actually be given away if desired. Chen Mu responded with a bright, confident smile. He even offered to add another 10,000 on top. The skeleton froze in confusion, unable to understand the intention behind such generosity. Chen Mu leaned forward slightly, still smiling. He explained that the full 20,000 ghost coins would belong to the driver as long as a certain condition was agreed upon. He added that even more coins would arrive every month in the future. The skeletal driver's jaw moved slowly as he stared at the offer. A single question emerged from deep within the hollow skull: what condition? Chenmu sat comfortably in the back seat, his expression calm and confident. With a light smile he stated his condition. The skeletal driver was to become his exclusive driver, available anytime on call whenever needed. He added that good performance would even earn an extra bonus. The skeleton stared at him in stunned silence. A troubled thought rose inside the ghostly mind. Working non-stop as a taxi driver normally earned only 3,000 a month, yet this young man casually offered 20,000 with a wave of his hand. The difference felt unbelievable. Chenmu then snapped his fingers. A sharp sound echoed through the taxi, and several glowing stacks of ghost coins materialized, piling up one after another. Purple light filled the space as the money shimmered like treasure. The skeleton's eyes lit up, literally turning into glowing dollar signs. Ghostly excitement spread across the bony face as floating bills drifted through the air. Overwhelmed by the offer, the driver shouted his acceptance on the spot. Chenmu spoke with a relaxed smile and told the skeletal driver to sign the contract. Starting tomorrow, the ghost would officially become his exclusive driver. In the next moment, the skeleton respectfully presented a phone on top of the signed contract. With great sincerity, he explained that the phone should be kept close. He promised that the moment a call was made, he would appear within 5 minutes without fail. Inside the taxi, the skeleton's thoughts were brimming with determination. Such lavish spending from Chenmu made the ghost feel that this employer must be treated with the utmost care, and under no circumstances could he be allowed to slip away. Chenmu reviewed the contract, nodded with satisfaction, and issued one more instruction. He told the driver to return the next morning at 10 o'clock to pick him up at the same location. The skeletal driver straightened his back, glowing with enthusiasm. With a hand pressed over his chest, he assured his new boss that reliability was his strongest trait. His voice rang with confidence and loyalty, eager to prove his worth. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the quiet street, warming the buildings and casting soft shadows under the trees. Inside a small apartment, Chenmu stepped out with a slice of bread in his mouth, preparing for the day ahead. He reflected on the world's condition. The weird apocalypse had only recently begun, yet strange scenarios were increasing everywhere. Ordinary people feared even approaching those places. Entering them voluntarily was something most wouldn't dare to think about. Chenmu, however, viewed things differently. He believed this era of chaos presented a rare opportunity, one that could help him reach the pinnacle of life and secure an unshakable position. Still, he understood his own limits. With his current strength, he couldn't challenge scenarios that required overwhelming force. Then an idea struck. A memory surfaced. There was a place nearby, the Mist Museum. The museum owner, Duke William, stood at the Ghost General tier, a level few could match. Beneath him, countless powerful subordinates served at the Ghost Soldier tier. And Duke William possessed his greatest treasure, the Death-Heavy Armor, a Ghost General tier artifact. Rumor stated that anyone who wore that armor became nearly immune to most damage caused by the weird. However, the armor could not be obtained through missions or combat. The only way to gain it was through Duke William's voluntary goodwill. But according to memories from his previous life, Duke William had been struggling financially for a very long time. Though he looked glorious on the outside, he was actually short on money. Realization dawned on Chenmu, and his expression shifted into excitement. Out of everything in the world, ghost coins were the one thing he had in abundance. Just then, a sharp chime rang out through the apartment as the doorbell lit up repeatedly. Chenmu walked over and opened the door. Standing outside was a well-dressed skeleton in a tuxedo and red bow tie. Chenmu expressed mild surprise, noting how punctual the visitor was. The skeleton replied calmly that punctuality was the most basic standard for an exclusive driver. The skeletal driver then lifted a bag and a drink, explaining that Chenmu likely hadn't eaten breakfast yet, so food had been bought along the way. Chenmu accepted it with a simple thanks. The driver stepped aside and opened the door of the car, inviting Chenmu to get in. While holding the door open, the skeleton chuckled, saying that serving well was the best way to ensure a generous bonus. Once inside the car, Chenmu looked ahead with a thoughtful expression. He turned toward the driver and asked if there was a mall nearby where gifts for the weird could be purchased. The skeletal driver turned slightly and asked if someone of Chenmu's status was looking for a high-end mall. Chenmu nodded, confirming that the higher end the place was, the better. The skeleton then shared a suggestion. He explained that there was a notorious mall located in the suburbs, one famous for selling luxury goods. He recommended visiting that place first to check if anything suitable could be found. Hearing that, Chenmu's eyes brightened with interest, and he immediately agreed, instructing the driver to head there. The driver grinned, gripping the steering wheel with confidence. He told Chenmu to sit tight, announcing that they were setting off. A moment later, the purple taxi shot forward like a rocket, leaving streaks of motion behind as it raced down the street at high speed. Chenmu leaned back in his seat with a satisfied smile. He thought to himself that old Wang's attitude was far better than expected. It became clear that money truly made even ghosts work with enthusiasm. The purple taxi sped through the streets, rushing toward the destination. Soon the car rolled into a worn-down district, stopping in front of an eerie aging building. Chenmu looked out the window and asked if this was the place. The skeletal driver confirmed silently as the structure towered above them. A sign identified it as the Depraved Mall, a bleak, abandoned-looking complex with cracked windows and drifting leaves swirling in the air. Stepping out of the car, Chenmu glanced up at the building with determination. He then instructed the skeletal driver to stay with the vehicle and keep watch while he went inside to do his shopping. The skeleton straightened instantly and replied with full loyalty. As Chenmu walked toward the mall entrance, the skeletal driver watched from behind. In the driver's mind, a quiet realization surfaced. Chenmu's instructions showed careful thought. Without the nether taxi, the skeleton was only at the ghost soldier tier, a level too weak to be of real use in dangerous situations. If trouble appeared, the driver would be useless outside the taxi. If he drove the nether taxi into battle to rescue Chenmu, the car would grant an invincibility buff. In that case, no matter how strong the enemy was, they would be unable to harm Chenmu at all. Excitement filled the skeleton's empty eyes. He silently praised Chenmu's strategy as truly brilliant. Inside the mall, Chenmu stepped forward and immediately felt the temperature drop. Despite the heat of summer outside, icy air wrapped around him, frost forming beneath his feet. The sudden chill confirmed that this place was indeed a weird scenario. As he moved deeper into the corridor, the blue light revealed blood smeared across the walls. Bloody handprints covered the surface. Layer upon layer, Chenmu observed the scene calmly. From the number of stains, it was clear this mall had already swallowed many unlucky victims. Chenmu continued deeper into the eerie hallway, his footsteps echoing through the blue light as bloodstains stretched across the floor. His expression hardened, showing caution and focus as he prepared for whatever might appear in this strange mall. Just then, a voice suddenly echoed from the darkness ahead. A woman stepped forward, smiling unnaturally, her mouth stitched at the corners, her eyes glowing with an unsettling blue light. She greeted him politely, welcoming him and asking what he wanted to buy. Chenmu looked at her calmly and asked if this place was truly the Depraved Mall. The woman confirmed it with a grin, her smile widening unnaturally. She stepped closer and warned him not to think about escaping. According to her, anyone who spent money inside the mall would be allowed to leave safely. As she spoke, her long sharp nails reached out and grabbed his shoulder, her expression shifting into a twisted, predatory smile. Chenmu looked at her calmly, a faint smile forming on his face. In a relaxed tone, he pointed out that those seemed to be the mall's rules. The blonde girl, slightly impatient, urged him to hurry up and spend. Chenmu's expression turned serious as he leaned forward. He told her to stop playing tricks, saying that if he wasn't mistaken, even if he didn't buy anything, he could still leave safely. Her expression changed instantly. Shock flashed across her face and a bead of sweat slid down her cheek as she asked how he knew. Chenmu's smile deepened, his eyes steady and confident. He calmly replied that he had seen this kind of situation many times before. Chenmu leaned slightly closer, his eyes calm as he explained that the rules stating one could leave the mall after buying something were actually a misdirection. People who entered the mall for the first time would panic. Wanting to escape as quickly as possible, they would choose a product without thinking too much. However, in the end, those people would violate the rules because they didn't have enough ghost coins to pay. Once that happened, there was only one outcome: they would lose their lives right there. Chenmu then calmly revealed the truth behind the deadlock. He explained that the rules only stated that one could leave after spending, but they never said that leaving without spending was forbidden. With a confident expression, he added that even if he turned around and left right now, there was nothing she could do to stop him. The blonde woman's expression stiffened for a moment, clearly surprised by Chenmu's words. Then, her lips curled into a faint smile as she admitted that he was indeed very smart. she acknowledged that many people had already fallen into the trap of those rules. Her sharp nails slowly released their grip, and her tone turned calm as she told him that since he had already figured out the path to survival, he should leave quickly. She added that she wouldn't stop him. Chen Mu remained standing there unmoved. He spread his hands slightly and asked why he should leave, saying that he had come here to spend. Her expression immediately darkened. With a hint of disbelief and irritation, she stared at him and questioned whether he actually intended to spend. Chen Mu smiled lightly and pointed upward, calmly confirming that he wanted to spend. He told her to take him to the highest class counter in the mall. The blonde woman's expression turned sharp as she warned him not to seek his own death. She explained that even the cheapest items in the mall cost more than 10,000 ghost coins, questioning whether he could really afford it. Chen Mu casually brushed off her words, pretending not to hear clearly. Then, without hesitation, he revealed a stack of ghost coins in his hand. The moment she saw the money, her entire demeanor changed instantly. Her eyes lit up with excitement as greed replaced her earlier hostility. She quickly declared that she would take him to the 6th floor, saying that only luxury goods were worthy of someone of his status. Chen Mu remained calm and composed. He handed over a portion of the money, telling her to consider 20,000 as a tip for entertaining him. He added that he was in a hurry and told her to lead the way. Delighted, the woman rushed ahead eagerly, clutching the money, while Chen Mu followed behind with a relaxed and confident expression. The blonde woman held onto Chen Mu's arm and led him forward with a wide smile, politely telling him to follow her. Moments later, the elevator doors opened with a soft sound, and the glowing number showed the 6th floor. She guided Chen Mu out as they arrived, her tone cheerful as she explained that this floor contained all the luxury brands in the ghost world, allowing him to choose anything he desired. Chen Mu calmly observed his surroundings, his gaze steady as he thought to himself that to move someone like the Duke, one must cater to his tastes. He walked toward a section filled with neatly arranged wine bottles. Standing before the shelves, he noted that aristocratic households usually kept wine cabinets. A quiet realization surfaced in his mind. From his past life memories, he recalled that one of the Duke's wishes had been to collect high-end red wine. Chen Mu stood calmly in front of the counter, his gaze steady as he looked at the woman. The blonde attendant smiled politely and asked what kind of wine he would like to buy. She explained that all the products in the store were custom-made according to the tastes that ghosts preferred the most. However, beneath that pleasant smile, a sinister thought surfaced. She quietly mocked him in her mind, thinking that if he couldn't afford it, he would end up just like the reckless youths before, becoming her next meal. Chen Mu remained unfazed. Without hesitation, he picked up a bottle and calmly gave his order. He asked for 100 bottles of their most expensive red wine, and added that the packaging must be the most luxurious available. The woman's expression didn't change outwardly, but her eyes flickered with cold amusement. In her mind, she sneered at him, thinking that he was an idiot. She believed he was trying to pay with normal currency in a place like this, and decided to watch how long he could keep up the act. The blonde attendant leaned slightly forward with a polite smile and informed Chen Mu that everything was ready. She stated that the total cost came to 23 million. Chen Mu sat calmly, his expression unchanged as he looked at her. The woman's smile turned cold and mocking. She told him that if he didn't have the money to pay, he could simply leave his head behind to offset the debt. Chen Mu remained completely unfazed. With a relaxed tone, he told her there was no need to try to scare him, as he could easily afford such a small amount. At that moment, he casually extended his hand and revealed a massive pile of ghost coins, their glow filling the space. The woman's expression paused for a brief moment before she spoke again, reminding him that the payment required ghost coins, 23 million of them. Chen Mu's lips curved into a faint smile. Holding the stack of ghost coins in his hand, he looked at her calmly and asked what she thought he had been giving her all this time. The blonde woman stared at the pile of ghost coins in her hands, her eyes trembling with disbelief. Her voice shook as she exclaimed that it was impossible. The apocalypse had only descended for a month, yet Chen Mu somehow possessed such an overwhelming amount of ghost coins. She quickly began checking the money again, her movements hurried and nervous, making sure everything was real. Chen Mu sat calmly on the sofa across from her, his expression indifferent. He looked at her and asked if she had confirmed it. The woman swallowed and forced herself to remain composed. With a respectful tone, she told him to wait for a moment, explaining that for such a massive transaction, the manager needed to be present. Chen Mu closed his eyes slightly, clearly impatient, and told her to hurry up, saying he had things to do. Without wasting another second, the woman turned and rushed away. As she pushed open the door, she quickly reported the situation, calling out to the manager that there was a customer downstairs who had just bought 100 bottles of high-end red wine in a single purchase. Inside the office, a red-haired woman wearing glasses sat calmly in her chair. Her sharp eyes glanced forward as she questioned whether the attendant had mistaken another foolish human carrying ordinary currency for an actual customer. The blonde woman quickly stepped forward and respectfully explained that she had already verified it. She said that 20 million ghost coins were sitting downstairs and urged the manager to come and see it for herself. Hearing this, the manager's expression shifted slightly. Curious, she moved toward the door. Peeking from the side, she caught sight of the glowing pile of ghost coins beside Chen Mu. A moment of shock flashed across her face as she realized it was real ghost currency. However, in the very next second, her demeanor completely changed. She adjusted her clothes neatly, her expression turning elegant and composed, a confident smile forming on her lips. Without hesitation, she walked out to meet him. Standing before Chen Mu, she bowed slightly with a polite and respectful attitude. In a calm and refined tone, she apologized for making him wait and asked how she should address him. Chen Mu looked at the manager calmly and introduced himself, saying that his surname was Chen. The manager maintained her polite smile and respectfully addressed him as Mr. Chen. She informed him that he had already spent over 20 million and congratulated him on becoming the depraved mall's very first gold client. As she spoke, she presented a golden card in front of him. Before she could continue, Chen Mu raised his hand slightly and stopped her. In a calm tone, he told her not to be anxious, explaining that he had not finished buying yet. The manager was momentarily stunned. A hint of confusion appeared on her face as she repeated his words in disbelief, wondering if she had heard correctly. Chen Mu simply smiled, his expression relaxed and confident. He confirmed it casually, saying of course. Then, with a faint grin, he added that the 100 bottles of wine were only just the beginning. The manager maintained her polite smile and told Chen Mu that if he had any other needs, she could introduce them to him one by one. Chen Mu waved his hand casually, his expression calm. He told her there was no need for that trouble and instructed her to bring the most expensive jewelry in the shop. Hearing this, the manager froze for a moment. Then, in a sudden exaggerated reaction, her mind spun in shock. She stammered and quickly agreed, addressing him respectfully as Mr. Chen, while inwardly thinking that he was simply inhumanly rich. Moments later, she presented a dazzling crystal necklace. She explained that the necklace was worth 1 million ghost coins and that it was one of the most expensive pieces of jewelry in the entire mall. Chen Mu glanced at it briefly, his expression unchanged. Without hesitation, he calmly told her to wrap it up. The attendant carefully held the box, still slightly stunned as the luxurious item was prepared. Chen Mu looked at the crystal necklace with a faint smile, imagining it in his mind. He thought that such a beautiful crystal necklace would be perfect for the Duchess. Without hesitation, he shifted his gaze to the nearby display and calmly added that he would take those watches as well. The attendant quickly responded with a bright smile, telling him that the total came to 5 million ghost coins. She politely asked him to rest for a moment while they packaged everything for him. Chen Mu sat there calmly, observing his surroundings. In his mind, he noted that the goods here were indeed impressive. He realized that in the future, this place would definitely become a major consumption venue for more and more strange beings. A thought surfaced in his mind. Since the mall had such potential, why not simply buy it outright? With that idea, Chen Mu looked toward the attendant and asked if there was someone in charge. He said he wanted to speak with them. Then, with a calm and steady tone, he instructed her to ask the person in charge how much it would cost to sell the entire mall to him. The manager's eyes widened in shock as she stared at Chen Mu. In disbelief, she exclaimed that she had been treating him as a customer, yet he actually wanted to become her boss by buying the entire mall. Trying to regain her composure, she apologized respectfully and explained that the leader leader was currently away on a business trip. She admitted that she did not have the authority to make such a decision, but assured him that once the leader returned she would notify him immediately and asked if that would be acceptable. Chen Mu listened calmly and gave a slight nod. With a relaxed expression, he said that was the only way for now. The manager's attitude quickly softened again. With a polite smile, she told him that if he had any needs she could open a supreme black gold card for him. Chen Mu glanced at her and asked calmly whether that card came with any privileges. The manager smiled gracefully as she explained the privileges of the supreme black gold card. She told Chen Mu that with this card he could modify the mission rules of the depraved mall at will. It was an authority equivalent to that of a scenario boss. She then added that if he wished to stroll through the mall, they would clear the entire venue in advance to ensure he enjoyed the highest level of service and a supreme consumption experience. Chen Mu listened calmly, then casually asked her to open one for him. At the same time, he added another request. He wanted 50 additional shopping cards, each with a limit of 5,000 ghost coins. The manager's smile widened as she quickly agreed. A moment later, she respectfully presented the card with both hands, telling him that this was his supreme black gold card. She added that the 50 shopping cards were a gift for him, a small token of appreciation. Chen Mu took the card, a faint smile appearing on his face. In a calm tone he simply thanked her. A bright flash of light suddenly burst from Chen Mu's hand as a ring appeared, radiating a soft glow. The manager's eyes widened slightly as she observed it, her thoughts racing. She realized that to possess a spatial ring at such a young age meant that Chen Mu was far from ordinary. His background must be extraordinary. Chen Mu calmly stored everything away, his expression remaining relaxed and composed. After finishing his business, he turned slightly and spoke in a casual tone, saying that they would end things here for today. He added that he still had other matters to handle and that he would be leaving now. The manager immediately straightened her posture and respectfully saw him off. Along with the staff, she bowed slightly and bid him farewell, addressing him as Supreme Black Gold VIP Mr. Chen. They expressed that they looked forward to his next visit. Outside, inside a car, a skeleton driver sat in shock. Its hollow eyes widened as it exclaimed in disbelief about the Supreme Black Gold status. In a stunned tone, it muttered that such a level could only be reached by spending tens of millions of ghost coins. The skeleton driver quickly stepped forward and respectfully opened the car door, addressing Chen Mu as his boss and inviting him inside. After getting into the car, the skeleton glanced at him and asked where they were going next. Chen Mu sat calmly in his seat, his expression relaxed. Without answering immediately, he reached into his pocket and took out a small red box. He casually handed it over, telling the driver not to rush and to hold it first. The skeleton carefully accepted the box, staring at it in confusion as it asked what it was. Chen Mu leaned back slightly, a faint smile appearing on his face. In a calm tone, he told the driver that it was a gift and asked him to open it and see if he liked it. The skeleton froze for a moment, clearly surprised, as shock and excitement began to rise within it. The skeleton carefully opened the red box, and the moment the lid lifted, a radiant glow burst out. Its hollow eyes widened as shock filled its expression. A stunned voice escaped from it, overwhelmed by what it saw. Inside the box lay a luxurious watch, shining brilliantly under the light. The skeleton trembled slightly as it stared at the item. In disbelief, it muttered that it was a zombie Constantin watch. Its hands shook as it held the box, clearly overwhelmed by the value of the gift. Tears began to gather in its empty eye sockets as emotion surged within it. In a trembling voice, it told Chen Mu that the gift was too valuable and that it could not accept it. Chen Mu simply smiled, his expression relaxed and gentle. He told the skeleton to keep it, saying that as long as it followed him and worked hard, there would be plenty of benefits in the future. The skeleton was stunned, deeply moved by his words. In its mind, memories surfaced of its previous employers, people who had only exploited its labor and treated it like nothing more than a beast of burden. Compared to that past, the kindness Chen Mu showed now felt completely different. The skeleton stared at the glowing watch, its empty gaze filled with emotion as it reflected on everything. In its mind, a firm thought formed. It realized that Chen Mu was completely different from anyone it had served before. Not only was he kind-hearted, but he was also incredibly generous. Overwhelmed with gratitude, tears streamed down its hollow eye sockets. In a trembling yet determined voice, it declared that from now on, it would follow Chen Mu's lead in everything. Chen Mu smiled calmly, his expression relaxed. He told the skeleton not to get too excited and instructed it to take him to the Mist Museum. The skeleton immediately straightened up, its tone filled with energy as it responded that they would set off right away. Without wasting another second, the car roared to life. Tires screeched against the ground as it sped through the city streets, leaving dust swirling behind. The surroundings quickly blurred as the vehicle rushed forward, heading toward its destination. Inside the car, Chenmu's eyes narrowed slightly as a serious thought crossed his mind. Having already made so many preparations in advance, he knew that this time he had to secure the death-heavy armor no matter what. Moments later, the vehicle slowed to a stop. The skeleton driver turned slightly and respectfully informed Chenmu that they had arrived. Without hesitation, Chenmu stepped out of the car, his movements calm and composed. He then turned back slightly and told the skeleton to find a place nearby to rest. He added that he would call once he was done. The skeleton immediately agreed without any hesitation, responding with confidence that it would do as instructed. Chenmu stepped forward, his shoes tapping lightly against the ground as he moved ahead without hesitation. Not far from the entrance, a small group of people was gathered in front of a large imposing gate. They stood close together, clearly discussing something among themselves. As Chenmu approached, one of them noticed his presence. The man turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing as he spoke, wondering if another one had come. The group's attention quickly shifted toward Chenmu, their gazes filled with curiosity and caution. One of them stepped forward and addressed him, asking if he had also received the mission notification. Another man beside him smiled faintly and suggested cooperation. He explained that working together would increase their chances of winning. However, Chenmu showed no interest and refused without hesitation. In his mind, betrayal and treachery were common in the apocalypse. He believed that teaming up with random people would only lead to an unknown death. Seeing his response, one of the others grew irritated and called him arrogant. He mocked Chenmu, saying that acting cool in such a situation was foolish, and that without allies to help, the only outcome would be a dead end. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a frightened woman clung to a man, expressing her fear about the strange and dangerous mission. The man tried to reassure her, confidently saying that he had managed to obtain extremely rare ghost coins this time, and that they would definitely be able to clear the mission. With a smug expression, he revealed that just to acquire 10 ghost coins, he had spent nearly 8 million, and he was counting on them to succeed this time. The woman looked at the man with teary eyes and clung to him, saying she had always known he was the best. She confessed that she liked him very much and begged him not to abandon her. The man smiled confidently and reassured her that as long as she listened to him, everything would be fine. He even promised that once the strange mission was over, he would get a divorce and marry her. Not far away, Chenmu watched the scene calmly. He thought to himself that he hadn't expected someone like that man to actually obtain ghost coins. Meanwhile, the couple leaned closer to each other, completely absorbed in their own world. Noticing the gaze, the man suddenly turned and snapped, asking what he was looking at. With an arrogant tone, he mocked him, asking if he had never seen a rich person before. But suddenly, a force surged forward, and the surroundings distorted as if space itself had shifted. In the next moment, a voice echoed in the air, welcoming them to the Mist Museum, explaining that they would act as guests and visit the family of Ghost General Duke William, who lived there in seclusion. The group was then guided forward, walking together toward a massive ancient structure. The atmosphere grew heavier with each step as they approached the towering doors. The voice spoke once more, politely inviting them to enjoy the banquet prepared by the Duke to their heart's content. Standing before the large gates, one of the young men reached out and knocked. The sound echoed sharply in the silent surroundings as they waited for what would come next. The massive doors slowly creaked open, revealing a dim and eerie interior. A figure stood inside, dressed neatly like a servant, but his glowing eyes gave away his unnatural presence. In a calm voice, he welcomed them, saying that new guests had arrived again and invited them to come in. He introduced himself as Roni, the Duke's butler. As he stepped forward from the shadows, an unsettling aura spread through the hall, making the atmosphere even heavier. Seeing him, two of the young men trembled in fear. One of them stuttered, asking if that was really a ghost, while the other admitted it was his first time seeing one. Behind them, the wealthy man grew nervous as well. Beside him, the red-dressed woman asked him anxiously if the creature would attack them from behind while they were entering. Trying to stay composed, he reassured the woman beside him, saying there was nothing to fear. He claimed it was just a minion and that it would not dare to do anything to them. So, one by one, everyone entered the Mist Museum. Seeing them, the butler clicked his tongue in annoyance and remarked that they were just like the previous group, rude and stingy. He criticized them for visiting Duke William without even bringing a gift. Just then he paused and noticed something unusual. His gaze shifted as he realized there was one more person present. Shenmue stood calmly, a faint smile on his face as he stepped forward. The butler looked at him coldly and questioned why he had not come inside yet, stating that he had no interest in wasting time on someone who was as good as dead. Unbothered, Shenmue calmly spoke, identifying the figure in front of him as Duke William's butler. The butler confirmed it, and, with a displeased expression, ordered him to hurry up and go wait in the hall instead of standing there like a statue. Shenmue calmly raised his hand and said that he had a gift he wanted to present. As he revealed it, a dazzling glow spread outward. Seeing it, the butler was instantly shocked. He recognized it at once. It was a spatial ring. With a polite smile, the young man explained that it was his first time visiting and apologized for the intrusion. He asked the butler to accept the small token as a gesture of respect. The butler's attitude immediately changed. He nodded with satisfaction and admitted that it was not bad, finally acknowledging that someone among them had proper manners. Shenmue smiled and added that he hoped the butler would like it, mentioning that he had been worried he might have chosen the wrong gift and caused offense. As the butler leaned closer and opened the box, his glowing eyes widened in shock as he stared at the item inside. He could hardly believe what he was seeing and wondered if it was a roll ghost watch worth 300,000. Still stunned, he looked at Shenmue and cautiously asked if he had taken out the wrong gift, saying that such an item should be meant for the Duke, not for someone like him, as he was merely a butler. Shenmue smiled warmly and shook his head. He explained that the gift was specifically for him. He praised the butler's loyalty, saying that he had spent half his life worrying and working for the Duke, and that such dedication earned his admiration. Hearing this, the butler's expression softened. He smiled with satisfaction and declared that he would accept the gift out of respect. With a confident tone, he added that although he was only a butler, he still held some authority. He assured Shenmue that he was welcome as their guest, and promised that with him around, he would make sure he could leave the Mist Museum completely unharmed. Shenmue smiled lightly and told the butler that he was too kind. In his mind, he felt satisfied, thinking that spending a mere 100,000 in exchange for a life-saving charm was completely worth it. As they walked together, the butler suddenly asked if the people who had just entered earlier were his friends and whether they required any special care. However, Shenmue told the butler that he did not know them. Hearing this, the butler nodded in understanding. He explained that there was still some time before the Duke's banquet. Before that, there would be a small game, and he politely asked Shenmue to move to the hall and rest for a while. Meanwhile, the others also gathered. Inside the grand hall, the red-dressed woman clung tightly to the rich man, trembling as she called out to Brother Hai, begging him not to let her out of his sight. Not far away, two young men stood watching, their expressions tense and uneasy. As they saw Shenmue in the distance, they were unable to believe what they were seeing, wondering how that kid had managed to become so friendly with the butler. Meanwhile, the butler politely served tea to Shenmue, offering it with respect. Shenmue accepted it calmly and thanked him. Watching from afar, the others grew even more frustrated. One of them clenched his teeth and muttered that it was no wonder the young man had acted so aloof earlier. He had already found a way in. He then whispered to his companion that they needed to rope him in somehow. Even if the young man had no real skills, he could still be useful, at the very least acting as a shield for them in danger. At that moment, the butler addressed the guests, informing them that the banquet was still being prepared. To help pass the time, he announced that Lord Duke had specially arranged a small game of hide-and-seek. Holding the glass in his hand, Shenmue's lips curled into a faint smile as he quietly remarked that it was finally coming. Soon after, the rules of the game were announced. The first rule declared that the game would last for 2 hours. During this time, no one was allowed to leave the first floor area, and anyone who violated this rule would be immediately obliterated. The second rule followed closely. Once the game began, the security guards would act as hunters, patrolling the exhibition hall. Anyone discovered by them would be executed without hesitation. Then came the third rule. Except for the walls and the floor, all stationary objects within the hall were considered part of the Duke's exhibits. Anyone who dared to move or touch them would face the Duke's punishment. After laying out all the rules, the butler calmly announced that the game was about to begin and wished everyone good luck. As the game began, the timer immediately started counting down from 2 hours. At that moment, the atmosphere suddenly turned freezing cold. A chill spread through the hall, and frost-like particles drifted in the air. The red-dressed woman looked around in fear, wondering why it had suddenly become so cold and whether a ghost was about to appear. Panicking, Brother Hai urged the woman beside him not to be afraid and suggested that they find a place to hide first. Nearby, another participant quickly realized a limitation within the rules. He noted that since they were not allowed to touch the exhibits, it meant they could not hide inside any furniture either. The realization made his expression turn grim. As fear spread, someone shouted in frustration, cursing that the situation was clearly designed to kill them. Panic began to take hold of the crowd. Amid the chaos, however, Chen Mu remained calm. He quietly analyzed the situation, concluding that the path to survival must be hidden within the rules themselves. With a death exemption medallion in his possession, he decided to use this opportunity to sharpen his ability to find a way to survive. Just then, a thick, eerie purple mist began to spread throughout the exhibition hall, slowly swallowing the surroundings in a cold, suffocating haze. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. Soon, hunters started to emerge from within the fog. The red-dressed woman spotted them first and immediately panicked, shouting in fear that there was a ghost. Her voice echoed loudly through the hall. Before she could continue, Brother Hai slapped her on the cheek. Her head snapped to the side, silencing her. He angrily told her to shut up, warning that yelling like that would only get them discovered. Meanwhile, the hunters moved slowly through the purple haze, searching the area to find the players. Suddenly, one of them noticed movement nearby. Not far away, the red-dressed woman and her lover were hiding behind a display, trembling as tears filled her eyes. She begged desperately not to be found, but then one of the hunters slowly approached and appeared behind them. In a chilling voice, it declared that it had found an outsider. Hearing those words, Brother Hai and the red-dressed woman froze. Panic instantly took over. Brother Hai's face turned pale as he let out a terrified scream, his body shaking uncontrollably as the danger closed in. As the ghost closed in, the man shouted for help. Without hesitation, he pushed the woman away and turned to flee on his own. The red-dressed woman stumbled forward, reaching out toward him as tears streamed down her face. She begged him not to leave her behind, her voice filled with desperation as he ran farther away without looking back. Left alone, she trembled in fear, unable to understand why the ghost had not attacked her yet. Her heart pounded as confusion mixed with terror. Not far away, two survivors faced another ghost directly. One of them realized the situation instantly and declared that it was over. They had already been spotted. Thinking quickly, one of them came up with a plan. He told his partner to stall the ghost while he circled around to launch a sneak attack from behind. The other nodded, eyes wide, and said he understood, preparing himself for the desperate move. One of the boys stepped forward, shouting at the ghost to come at him if it had the courage. He rushed in and grabbed the ghost, yelling for his big brother to strike quickly, and hit it from behind with a stick. He struggled to hold it in place, desperate to make the plan work. But the ghost only mocked him, coldly telling him that the man he was trying to help had already run away long ago. Hearing that, the boy's face twisted in shock and anger. He shouted in disbelief, accusing Zhao Sang of betrayal, reminding him that he had once saved his life, yet was now abandoned without hesitation. Before he could react further, the ghost killed him. At that moment, Zhao Sang ran as fast as he could to save his life. With a cold and ruthless tone, he admitted that he had survived this long by being ungrateful and selling out his own brothers. Chen Mu stood calmly in the eerie hall, observing the surroundings as he spoke thoughtfully about the exhibits, objects that no one could touch and things that could not move. As he examined the situation further, a realization struck him. He understood that the path to survival was hidden within these strange rules. With a faint smile, he decided to test his theory. Glancing toward the nearby ghost, he thought to test it on him. Moments later, the ghost approached him and declared that it had found him, ordering him to stop struggling and die quietly. Unfazed, Chen Mu simply looked at it and responded calmly, inviting the ghost to come closer if it wanted to act. The ghost glared at him with glowing eyes and threatened that if he did not run it would kill him. However, Chen Mu remained completely calm. With a faint smile, he warned that if the ghost dared to touch him, it would be the one to die instead. Hearing this, the ghost was taken aback and questioned how such a thing could even be possible. Chen Mu then explained the rule clearly. According to the rules, anyone who touched an exhibit would be executed. Since all unmoving objects were considered exhibits, as long as he remained still, he himself would count as one. Standing there confidently without moving, he looked straight at the ghost and challenged it, asking if it still dared to touch him. The ghost was stunned, its expression twisting in disbelief as it realized that the young man had already figured out the rules in such a short time. Understanding that it could no longer use him to increase its performance quota, the ghost decided not to waste any more time. It turned away, thinking it was better to hurry and find other targets. As the ghost walked off, Chen Mu quietly watched from behind. Once it was gone, he let out a small breath of relief and admitted to himself that his guess had been correct. But just as he relaxed, a sudden touch landed on his shoulder. Startled, he froze for a moment before reacting in shock, wondering who it was. Behind him stood a calm attendant, holding a tray with a glass of tea. The man politely informed him that his tea was ready. Hearing this, Chen Mu let out a breath and covered his face, admitting that he had been startled. For a moment, he had even thought that his judgment about the path to survival had been wrong. The attendant then explained that the place was cold and damp. The Lord Butler had been worried that he might feel cold, so he had specifically sent a cup of hot tea to warm him up. Chen Mu accepted the glass with a faint smile and calmly replied that he understood, asking the attendant to thank the butler on his behalf. The attendant raised a hand and calmly conveyed another message, stating that the Lord Butler had also instructed that if he ever felt bored, he could quit the game at any time. Chen Mu remained relaxed, hands in his pockets, completely unfazed by the disturbance. With a calm expression, he replied that there was no need, as he had already found the path to survival. Meanwhile, the red-dressed woman, watching from the shadows, observed the scene with a serious expression. She admitted to herself that she had not expected the young man to be so formidable. A thought quickly formed in her mind. If she could latch onto him, she was certain she would be able to get out of this place alive. Without hesitation, she rushed toward him, her movements swift and deliberate. As she approached, her demeanor suddenly changed. With a trembling voice and teary eyes, she called out to him, saying he looked handsome and that she was afraid. Reaching him, she looked up pitifully and pleaded, asking if he could protect her. Chen Mu looked at the woman with a cold expression and told her that instead of trying to please him, she should go and find that fat guy. The blonde woman stepped closer, placing her hand on Chen Mu's chest. She looked at him with pleading eyes and softly said that he should not be so heartless, insisting that she could do anything. Chen Mu remained unmoved. With a calm but sharp tone, he told her to hurry and find a safe corner to hide, adding that he did not want his clothes to be splattered with her blood. From a distance, Zhao Xiang watched the scene. His expression turned dark as anger rose within him. He cursed bitterly in his heart, questioning why he had to risk his life and even sell out his own brother just to barely survive. While he struggled so desperately, Chen Mu was living so calmly, with a woman throwing herself at him. Zhao Xiang stepped forward with a friendly smile and said that Chen Mu seemed quite capable, suggesting that the two of them should team up. He quickly added that there was no need to worry, as he was someone who valued loyalty the most. Chen Mu glanced at him with a faint smile, clearly unimpressed. In a calm but mocking tone, he suggested that Zhao Xiang should team up with the woman instead, saying they could keep each other warm. Zhao Xiang's expression twisted slightly, but he forced a grin. Turning to the woman, he tried to persuade her, saying that since Chen Mu looked down on them, she should come with him instead. He even boasted that even if the sky were to fall, he would hold it up for her. Meanwhile, Chen Mu casually lifted a glass and took a sip, showing no interest in the situation. In his mind, he noted that Zhao Xiang was clearly determined not to help him. Hearing Zhao Xiang's words, the woman hesitated for a moment. After thinking it over, she finally decided to trust him this once. Just then, a faint sound echoed through the hall as footsteps approached, breaking the quiet atmosphere. Zhao Xiang suddenly reacted, his expression changing as he realized the situation. He turned to the woman and shouted that things were bad. The security guards were coming. Without wasting another second, he grabbed her hand and urged her to follow him quickly. Startled, the woman nodded and agreed without hesitation. The two of them immediately ran off together, disappearing deeper into the hall. From behind, Chen-mu watched them leave with a calm and indifferent gaze. In his mind, he coldly remarked that the woman was truly foolish. She had already been betrayed once, yet she still trusted others so easily. Meanwhile, the butler examined the watch on his wrist with great interest, admiring its fine craftsmanship and material. He remarked with satisfaction that it was truly a luxury item. At that moment, a servant approached respectfully and informed him that the tea had been delivered. The butler nodded slightly before asking if the security guards had been informed. He reminded the servant that Mr. Chen wanted things to go smoothly in the game, and they could not allow those fools to harm him. The servant bowed his head and reported that Mr. Chen had already found a way to survive. Hearing this, the butler was visibly surprised. He questioned how it was possible that the game had only just begun, yet Mr. Chen had already discovered a shortcut to clear the stage. After a moment, the butler calmed down and praised Chen-mu, saying that he was indeed very wise. He admitted that he had initially thought Chen-mu was simply being generous, believing he wanted to ease the game by using gifts to buy his own safety. However, he quickly realized that Chen-mu was both courageous and resourceful. With such qualities, there was no need to worry about whether he could survive such a low-level game. The butler let out a sigh, admitting to himself that he had judged a gentleman's generosity with a petty mindset. Realizing his mistake, he firmly decided that he would make friends with Chen-mu. Without hesitation, he gave orders, telling the servant to immediately serve Mr. Chen a fruit platter. He even instructed him to bring a chair and move the sofa he was sitting on directly over to Chen-mu. The servant quickly nodded and agreed, saying he would handle it right away. Soon, inside the first-floor exhibition hall, the servant approached Chen-mu respectfully and presented the fruit platter while Chen-mu sat calmly, observing everything around him. After a moment, Chen-mu asked how long it would take for the game to end. From nearby, the servant responded that there were only 10 minutes left. Chen-mu's expression remained calm as he thought to himself that the most dangerous moment had finally arrived. He understood that the ghosts would take advantage of the moment when players were most relaxed, striking down those who believed they had already escaped death. Not far away, a group of ghost-like figures moved. One of them warned another, asking if he had a death wish. He reminded him that Chen-mu was a distinguished guest personally designated by the butler, and if Chen-mu got hurt, they would all be in trouble. The other ghost nodded and suggested that they should hurry and find the remaining targets, mentioning that his performance quota had not yet been met. They quickly agreed and prepared to move. At that moment, a voice echoed through the hall like a broadcast, announcing to all players that 10 minutes remained until the game ended. Hearing this, Zhao Shang leaned closer to the woman and reminded her that he had protected her for so long. Now that only 10 minutes remained, he suggested that it was finally time for him to have some fun. The woman blushed, looking at him with admiration as she praised him, calling him the most reliable and manly person she knew. Hearing this, he smirked confidently and replied that of course no one else could compare to him. She moved closer, her voice soft as she told him that he had to be gentle with her. Without hesitation, Zhao Sheng assured her that it would not be a problem, but in the very next moment, her expression suddenly changed. Her eyes widened in fear as she looked past him and shouted in panic, warning Zhao Sheng that something was right behind him. Confused, Zhao Sheng frowned slightly and asked what was wrong as he began to turn around. But before he could react, a horrifying figure appeared. A blood-stained skeleton loomed behind him, its hollow eyes fixed on them as it declared that it had finally found its target. In an instant, panic erupted. Zhao Sheng's expression twisted in shock as both of them screamed. Without hesitation, he shouted for the woman to help him hold the creature back. But instead of staying, he suddenly grabbed her and used her as a shield, pushing her forward toward the skeleton while he tried to escape. Realizing what he had done, the woman's eyes widened in disbelief and rage. She screamed at him, calling him a bastard and accusing him of abandoning her. Terror consumed her as she begged desperately for her life, pleading with the monster not to kill her, promising that she would do anything if she could just survive. The skeleton slowly approached her, its blood-stained body looming closer. In a cold and emotionless tone, it apologized, saying that all it needed was her life. In the next instant, it struck without hesitation. The woman's eyes widened in terror as the attack landed, and a burst of blood filled the air. Her body went limp as the brutal blow ended everything in a single moment. Not long after, a timer flashed. 6 hours had finally run out. Back in the hall, the surviving players gathered. One of them let out a long breath. relieved that the deadly game had finally come to an end. However, the mood quickly shifted. A man with a mustache glared in anger, questioning whether there was any justice left. He complained that while they had risked their lives to escape, someone else had been sitting comfortably, enjoying tea the entire time. Another survivor clenched his fists, frustration clear on his face. He couldn't understand why they were all forced into the same dangerous mission, yet someone else was allowed to remain safe and relaxed. Meanwhile, Chen Mu simply observed the situation. Without much emotion, he remarked that 2 people had died, making the survival rate 50%. To him, that outcome was completely normal. Just then, the butler approached them and announced that the hide-and-seek game had come to an end. With a faint smile, he wondered aloud if everyone had enjoyed themselves. Hearing this, the mustached man could not hide his dissatisfaction and let out a cold snort, his expression filled with anger. The tension in the room remained heavy, but the butler continued as if nothing had happened. In a composed tone, he informed them that Lord Duke had prepared a dinner banquet for everyone and instructed them to follow him to the 2nd floor. As they moved up the grand staircase, Chen Mu thought that he had finally reached a crucial step. As long as he could win the Duke's favor, he believed there would be no need to worry about failing to obtain the death-heavy armor. Soon they arrived at a magnificent dining hall. A long table stretched across the room, perfectly arranged with plates, glasses, and utensils, everything prepared with unsettling precision. The butler then stopped and turned toward them, raising 2 fingers as he began to explain the rules. He stated that there were only 2 rules for the dinner party. First, they must absolutely not behave rudely toward Duke William and the madam. Second, they must finish all the food assigned to them by Duke William, otherwise there would be punishment. Then the butler calmly informed them that Mr. Chen's seat was to the right of Duke William. Chen acknowledged it politely, thanking him for the arrangement. Once everyone had taken their seats, the butler announced that the dinner would now formally begin. At that moment, Duke William and the madam appeared together, welcoming everyone with calm smiles. Their presence instantly filled the room with an eerie pressure, their glowing red eyes making the atmosphere even more unsettling. The guests sat stiffly at the long dining table, none of them daring to relax. The Duke then raised his hand slightly and gave an order for the servants to serve food to the distinguished guests. A servant soon stepped forward, carrying a plate and carefully placing it in front of them. However, the moment the dish was revealed, one of the men couldn't hold back his reaction. He stared at the strange, unnatural food and exclaimed in shock that it wasn't something humans could eat at all. The chubby man stared at the plate in front of him, his face turning pale as a strange green vapor rose from the food. Covering his mouth in disgust, he blurted out in shock, questioning what kind of thing it even was. Sitting calmly at the head of the table, Duke William simply smiled. With a composed tone, he said that to show his sincerity, he would personally distribute the food to everyone. Before the situation could escalate further, Chen spoke up politely. He apologized for the interruption and said that he had prepared a small gift which he wished to present before the dinner began. Hearing this, the Duke's expression shifted slightly. A hint of interest appeared on his face. Then a pleased smile spread across his lips. He remarked that among so many people, it seemed there was finally someone sensible. Duke William's gaze sharpened as he noticed the item being presented. With clear interest, he questioned whether it was a spatial ring. In the next moment, a wooden box suddenly appeared on the table, landing with a heavy thud. The Duke and the woman beside him both looked at it, their attention fully drawn to the unexpected gift. Chen calmly gestured toward them, politely addressing Duke William and Madame Emily, inviting them to take a closer look. However, as the box sat there, Duke William quietly remarked that it looked completely ordinary, likely not something valuable at all. With a faint hint of disdain, he thought to himself that humans truly had no tact. However, when he opened the box, Duke William's expression changed instantly. His eyes widened in shock, unable to hide his disbelief. In a stunned voice, he questioned whether what he was seeing was the limited edition zombie Danton. At the same time, Madame Emily's eyes sparkled brightly as she looked inside the box. She gasped in excitement, recognizing it as the crystal necklace from the depraved mall, the very one she had wanted but could never bring herself to buy. Standing calmly before them, Chen spoke politely, saying that he hoped the Duke and Madame would do him the honor of accepting these small gifts. Hearing this, Duke William's attitude shifted completely. With a satisfied smile, he remarked that Mr. Chen was truly too polite. Turning to Emily, he instructed her to personally serve food to Mr. Chen as a gesture of respect. Chen responded with a light smile, accepting the arrangement without hesitation. In a calm and courteous tone, he said that he would trouble Madame Emily with the task. Madame Emily smiled gracefully and clapped her hands, instructing the servants to serve fruitcake to Mr. Chen. Hearing this, the mustached man was stunned. His eyes widened in disbelief as he watched the scene unfold, unable to believe that things could be handled in such a way. Soon, a servant stepped forward and placed the dessert in front of Chen. Chen accepted it calmly and politely thanked them for their hospitality. In response, the Duke simply stated that it was all as long as Mr. Chen was satisfied. Watching this, the mustached man suddenly had a realization. His eyes lit up as a thought struck him. If Chen could use gifts to win favor with these beings, then he could do the same. He excitedly thought that he could offer his ghost coins to the Duke as well. A confident smile spread across his face as he convinced himself that whatever Chen had brought could not possibly be more valuable than his ghost coins. In his mind, once he presented them, the Duke and Madame would surely treat him as the most distinguished guest. The mustached man suddenly stepped forward, declaring that he had also prepared gifts for Duke William and Madame Emily. His voice carried confidence as he tried to seize the moment. Hearing this, the Duke showed interest and told him to bring the gift forward so he could take a look. The man quickly took out his offering and respectfully presented it, urging the Duke to accept it. However, as the item was revealed, an unpleasant aura surrounded it, making the atmosphere instantly uncomfortable. The Duke's expression darkened. His eyes turned cold with anger as he felt insulted. In a furious tone, he shouted that the man was humiliating him and immediately ordered someone to drag him away. Panic spread across the man's face as he desperately tried to defend himself. Even as he was forced down, he shouted that it was ghost coins and argued that they were more valuable than whatever Chen had given. However, the Duke raised his hand, revealing the watch Mr. Chen had given him. It alone was worth 1,000,000 ghost coins, and he mocked the man, saying that he wasn't even worthy of polishing his shoes. Hearing that, the man froze in shock. As he was being dragged away, disbelief filled his face. He muttered in his heart that 1,000,000 ghost coins was an unbelievable amount, wondering how someone so young could possess such wealth. At the same time, Zhao Shang nearby narrowed his eyes and secretly thought to himself that Chen Mu must be a tycoon. Greed flickered in his expression as he considered that if he could steal that wealth, he could live freely even in this apocalypse. Meanwhile, the Duke turned back to Chen and calmly apologized, saying he had made him watch a joke and suggesting that they continue. Chen simply smiled and replied that it was no problem. A moment later, Madame Emily casually asked Chen whether the man sitting beside him was someone he knew and if she should take care of him. Chen shook his head without hesitation, stating that he did not know the man at all. Hearing this, the Duke nodded slightly and said he understood. He then looked at Zhao Shang and spoke with a faint smile, telling him to enjoy the meal and make sure to finish everything. Sitting before the strange green smoke-emitting dish, Zhao Shang's expression darkened. Anger surged within him as he glared ahead, cursing Chen in his heart for refusing to help him when a single word could have changed everything. He clenched his teeth and silently vowed that once they left this place, he would make him pay. Despite his fury, he lowered his head and picked up a forkful of the disgusting food. His eyes burned with resentment as he forced himself to eat, silently telling them to laugh while they still could. Moments later, the atmosphere shifted. After Zhao Shang finished eating the disgusting food, the butler announced that the mission had ended. He thanked them for being guests and stated that they were now free to leave. Zhao Shang immediately reacted, covering his mouth as nausea hit him, struggling to hold back the urge to vomit after swallowing the foul meal. Standing before Duke William, Chen Mu politely thanked Duke William and Madame Emily for their warm hospitality. Behind him, Zhao Shang clutched his stomach, his face pale and covered in cold sweat, still struggling from the aftermath of the meal. He shot a resentful glance back, his expression tense and filled with discomfort. At that moment, the Duke turned slightly toward Chen and told him that the man from earlier had shown clear hostility. He asked whether it was necessary to arrange for someone to dispose of him. Hearing this, Chen remained composed. With a faint smile, he thanked the Duke for his concern but declined the offer, saying there was no need to trouble him. He calmly explained that his subordinates were already waiting outside to take care of the matter. His words caused a subtle shift in the Duke's expression. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across his face as he realized that this Chen was not as simple as he appeared. Inwardly, he acknowledged that Mr. Chen actually had subordinates, and this made him reconsider his attitude. He began thinking that it might be time to bring out a valuable treasure to strengthen their relationship. The Duke looked at Chen with a faint smile and proposed that he had a ghost general tier treasure he wished to have appraised. He politely asked whether Chen had the time to assist him. Hearing this, Chen smiled calmly and replied that being able to see such a high-tier treasure was an honor for him. At that moment, a thought crossed his mind, and he inwardly noted that after waiting for so long, the Duke had finally taken the bait. With a satisfied expression, the Duke gestured forward and invited Chen to follow him. Sometime later, outside the gates of the Mist Museum Manor, Zhao Shang stood impatiently while clutching his stomach. He stared at the closed entrance with irritation and wondered why that brat still had not come out yet. Suddenly, a sharp pain twisted through his stomach. His body trembled violently as he grabbed his abdomen in agony. Sweat rolled down his face while he cursed under his breath, saying his stomach hurt badly. Realizing he could barely endure the pain any longer, he decided to leave first and buy some medicine. As he staggered away from the manor, he suddenly spotted a taxi waiting nearby on the empty road. His expression immediately brightened with relief. Laughing to himself, he declared that luck was truly on his side. He could not believe there was actually a taxi in such a deserted place. Without wasting another second, he climbed into the back seat and urgently ordered the driver to take him to the nearest hospital as fast as possible. The driver calmly replied with a simple acknowledgement and started driving. Leaning back against the seat while clutching his stomach, Zhao Sheng muttered angrily that once he took his medicine, he would return and slaughter that Chen Mu. But the moment those words left his mouth, the driver suddenly spoke in a cold voice, asking if the person he wanted to kill was Mr. Chen. Zhao Sheng froze in shock. His eyes widened as the driver slowly turned around, revealing a horrifying skull instead of a human face. Terror instantly filled Zhao Sheng's expression as he pointed forward with a trembling hand and screamed that the driver was a ghost. The skull-faced driver slowly turned his head back toward Zhao Sheng. Purple flames burned inside his hollow eye sockets as a cold and terrifying aura filled the inside of the taxi. In a threatening voice, the ghost demanded that Zhao Sheng answer his question. Trembling violently in fear, Zhao Sheng immediately confessed everything. He stuttered that there was no mistake and revealed that Chen Mu possessed a huge amount of ghost coins. Desperately trying to save himself, he begged the ghost not to kill him and promised that after robbing Chen Mu they could split the ghost coins together. But the skeleton driver let out a mocking laugh. In a cold voice, he asked if the fool really thought he would allow anyone to make a move against his boss. Zhao Shang's eyes widened in horror. His mind went blank as he realized that Chen Mu actually had a ghost working as his bodyguard. Shock overwhelmed him as he wondered what kind of background that brat truly had to command such a terrifying existence. Panic completely consumed him. He frantically grabbed the car door handle and screamed that he wanted to get off immediately. His trembling hands desperately pulled at the handle again and again, but the door refused to open. Fear twisted his expression as he shouted for the ghost to let him out quickly. Then suddenly, a strange purple glow appeared inside his eyes. His entire body froze as the eerie light spread through his pupils. The ghost taxi sped through the dark road covered in mist. From inside the vehicle, the ghost declared that there was no chance for mercy. The foolish man had provoked someone he never should have offended. He then told him to be more careful in his next life. Meanwhile, back at the Mist Museum Manor, Chen Mu arrived at Duke William's study room. The luxurious room was filled with bookshelves, elegant furniture, and a heavy purple atmosphere. Duke William personally welcomed Chen Mu inside with great respect. As soon as Chen Mu entered the room, his eyes landed on the large wine cabinet nearby. Seeing that every shelf inside was completely empty, he immediately smiled and remarked that it seemed his guess had been correct. He commented that Lord Duke must also be someone who loved wine, and that it was truly a pity for such a massive wine cabinet to remain empty. Hearing those words, Duke William's expression turned somewhat gloomy. He explained that although he had once been granted the noble title of Duke because of his great achievements during the Ghost World War, his family had long since fallen into decline. Chen Mu nodded in understanding. He said he deeply respected the Duke's character, so he had specially prepared some red wine in advance as a small gift. The moment Chen Mu finished speaking, the empty wine cabinet suddenly became filled to the brim with countless bottles of expensive wine. Fine red wine, premium liquor, and rare spirits instantly lined every shelf, shining brilliantly under the purple lights of the study. Duke William stared at the fully stocked cabinet in complete shock. His eyes widened as he looked at the countless bottles before him. Trembling slightly with excitement, he muttered that it was good wine, truly great wine. As he examined the collection more carefully, his breathing became heavier. These were famous wines worth millions of ghost coins, yet Chen Mu had casually gifted them to him simply out of respect for his character. Hearts practically appeared in Duke William's eyes as his opinion of Chen Mu skyrocketed instantly. Unable to contain his excitement, Duke William grabbed Chen Mu by the shoulders and declared that he was determined to become friends with him today. He revealed that he also happened to have a gift prepared for Chen Mu and asked him to wait a moment. Meanwhile, Chen Mu remained calm on the surface, but inwardly he smiled with satisfaction. He realized that the Duke's favorability had already risen high enough. It was finally time for the true objective to begin. A purple glow suddenly spread across the room as a magnificent golden suit of armor appeared before them. The armor radiated a powerful and ancient aura, making the entire study feel heavier. Duke William proudly introduced the treasure to Chen Mu. He explained that the armor was something he had collected over half his life, and that it had accompanied him through countless battles of life and death on the battlefield. And as long as the armor was worn, the user would become immune to all damage caused by anything below the Ghost King tier. Not only that, but the armor could also resist the power of rules themselves. Even the strange punishments hidden within mysterious scenarios could be blocked by its protection. However, such a terrifying ability came with a cooldown period of 1 month. Hearing this, Chen Mu's eyes narrowed slightly. He immediately realized the true value of the treasure. In disbelief, he asked if that meant he could avoid punishment even after violating the rules inside strange scenarios. Duke William nodded seriously. He explained that Chen Mu had already gifted him so many precious items, so he wished to repay him by offering the armor as a return gift. On the surface, Chen Mu quickly waved his hands and politely refused, saying he could not accept something so valuable. But the moment Duke William heard those words, his expression changed drastically. He immediately declared that if Chen Mu refused the gift, then it meant Chen Mu was looking down on him. Seeing how determined the Duke was, Chen Mu finally pretended to reluctantly give in. He smiled faintly and respectfully accepted the armor, saying that since Lord Duke showed such great affection, he could only accept the gift. The next moment, the golden armor suddenly transformed into a swirling mass of purple ghost energy and flew directly into Chen Mu's body. Chen Mu looked at the strange power entering him with surprise. Duke William quickly reassured him not to panic. He explained that the armor normally remained hidden within the user's body and would automatically appear whenever danger approached to protect its owner. As the purple energy spread through his body, Chen Mu could clearly feel an extremely powerful ghost aura surrounding and protecting him from within. Even after accepting the armor, Chen Mu still maintained a calm expression and politely told Duke William that although he appreciated his kindness, the armor was simply too precious. He said he could not take such a treasure for free. The next second, Chen Mu casually snapped his fingers. A mountain of ghost coins instantly appeared inside the room, glowing brightly as stacks upon stacks of money piled up before Duke William's eyes. Chen Mu calmly declared that the 10 million ghost coins should be considered payment for the armor. Duke William's eyes widened in complete shock. He stared at the massive pile of ghost coins in disbelief, unable to believe that Chen Mu would casually spend such an enormous amount. Soon, excitement filled Duke William's face. In his eyes, Chen Mu became even more admirable. He praised Chen Mu for not being greedy over petty gains and for refusing to let his friends suffer losses. To him, Chen Mu truly possessed noble character. Then Duke William took out a beautiful glowing token and handed it to Chen Mu. He explained that it was his personal token and represented the friendship between the two of them. And if Chen Mu ever encountered danger, he only needed to use the token to summon him and he would immediately appear by Chen Mu's side. Hearing those words, Chen Mu felt delighted inwardly. He realized that this meeting had brought him an unexpected harvest far greater than he originally expected. Now, if he ever encountered a problem that could not be solved with ghost coins alone, he could simply summon Duke William to handle it personally. With Duke William's terrifying strength and the protection of the special armor, Chen Mu's confidence immediately rose to another level. As the atmosphere relaxed, Chen Mu calmly revealed another part of his plan. He explained that he intended to purchase several more weird scenarios in order to stabilize and expand his assets. However, he admitted that he still did not know where to begin. Then Shenmue turned toward Duke William and asked whether the Duke had any brilliant ideas regarding the matter. After hearing Shenmue's plan to purchase more weird scenarios, Duke William fell into deep thought. After a moment, he calmly suggested that a school-type weird scenario possessed extremely high development potential. He explained that the needs of the weird were actually no different from those of ordinary humans. Even powerful ghosts valued education, and a good school was considered an indispensable resource among high-level ghosts. Hearing this, Shenmue immediately understood the implication. He realized that the children of high-level ghosts would naturally compete to enter prestigious schools, just like humans fighting for admission into top school districts. Duke William smiled and confirmed Shenmue's thoughts. He explained that if the school Shenmue purchased became good enough, countless high-level ghosts would actively try to curry favor with him just to secure admission opportunities for their children. By that point, if Shenmue ever wanted favors from those ghosts, obtaining them would be as easy as breathing. Shenmue sincerely thanked Duke William for the guidance. In response, Duke William casually stated that there was no need for such politeness between friends and that helping him was only natural. As time passed, Shenmue noticed it was getting late. He stood up from the sofa and politely stated that he would not continue disturbing the Duke and Madame's rest any longer. As Shenmue prepared to leave, Duke William suggested that he stay the night at the manor since the journey back was long and dangerous. However, Shenmue politely declined, explaining that he still had urgent matters to handle. Outside the Mist Museum Manor gate, the cold night mist covered the mountain roads. Madame gently reminded Shenmue to be careful on his way back because the entire mountain was shrouded in fog. Shenmue smiled and thanked her for the reminder. Before leaving, Shenmue suddenly handed Madame a black card. He casually stated that if the Duke and Madame ever wished to go shopping and spend money, they could simply swipe the card. Madame's eyes instantly sparkled in surprise when she recognized it as the black gold card from the depraved mall. Shenmue calmly explained that the spending limit was not very high and asked her not to mind it. Hearing this only made Madame even more impressed. She praised Shenmue for being far too polite. As Shenmue walked away into the misty night, Madame watched his back with glowing eyes and secretly thought that a man who was both handsome and rich was truly too charming. Meanwhile, near the car outside the manor, the skeleton chauffeur reported to Shenmue that he had already dealt with the Zhaoshang matter according to his instructions. Sitting inside the vehicle, Shenmue smiled with satisfaction and praised him for doing a good job. Inside the car, the skeleton chauffeur asked Shenmue where they were heading next. Leaning back in his seat, Shenmue calmly answered that they were going to the midnight cafeteria. The skeleton immediately responded enthusiastically and stepped on the accelerator as the taxi sped through the misty night roads. Not long later, Shenmue arrived at the midnight cafeteria. However, the atmosphere outside the place was tense. A large and fierce-looking man coldly declared that they refused the acquisition request. In anger, he slammed his foot onto the ground hard enough to crack the floor beneath him. He arrogantly shouted that a mere broken cafeteria dared to steal business away from his five-star hotel. At that moment, Shenmue entered the scene and asked what all the noise was about. Seeing him arrive, a blonde woman hurried over and informed him that someone was causing trouble inside the shop. The large man crossed his arms and stared at Shenmue with a mocking grin. He asked if Shenmue was the human who had bought the midnight cafeteria. Standing beside Shenmue, the blonde employee quietly explained that the man was the owner of the five-star hotel next door. She revealed that he had been trying to buy the cafeteria for a very low price for a long time and had already come there several times before. Hearing that, the hotel owner sneered arrogantly at Shenmue. He mocked him for being a weak human daring to do business with ghosts and claimed that Shenmue must have been tired of living. Shenmue simply smiled calmly and replied that the man did not seem very capable despite having such a loud mouth. The hotel owner's expression darkened instantly. Pointing at Shenmue, he arrogantly declared that he would buy the cafeteria for 30,000 ghost coins and warned him not to blame him for being impolite if he refused to sell. The blonde woman was immediately shocked. She shouted that 30,000 ghost coins was nothing but a dream. Around them, the cafeteria staff also stepped forward angrily, questioning how his actions were any different from robbery. They accused him of deliberately coming there to cause trouble. In response, the hotel owner released a burst of ghostly aura around his body and arrogantly declared that he was also a ghost captain to your existence. He mocked the cafeteria workers as lowly ghost citizens and asked if they truly wanted to fight him. Then he coldly explained that the only reason he had not tried to seize the cafeteria before was because the previous owner had also been a ghost captain tier ghost. But now that the cafeteria had fallen into the hands of a powerless human, crushing Shenmue would be as easy as crushing an ant. However, Shenmue remained completely calm. Raising 3 fingers casually, he told the man that he would count to 3 and gave him one chance to disappear from his sight immediately. He even added that if the man left now, he would not hold anything against him. Hearing that, the hotel owner burst into laughter. He mocked Shenmue arrogantly, saying that a mere human had no right to threaten him. Sneering proudly, he asked if Shenmue planned to jump up and hit his knee. The next moment, dark ghost energy exploded around the man as he roared furiously and charged forward with a deadly attack aimed directly at Shenmue. Seeing the attack coming, the blonde employee cried out in panic, fearing that Shenmue was about to be killed. But before the attack could reach him, golden armor suddenly covered Shenmue's body and blocked the attack effortlessly. The hotel owner screamed in shock as the backlash sent him flying backward across the cafeteria floor. Tables shook violently as he crashed away in pain. Meanwhile, Shenmue stood calmly in place, surrounded by fading purple particles. Looking completely unimpressed, he asked coldly if that weak attack was all the man had. Then Shenmue mocked him mercilessly, calling him a piece of trash who had barely reached Ghost Captain tier yet still dared to act arrogantly in front of him. The hotel owner's face instantly filled with disbelief and fear. Trembling slightly, he muttered that it was impossible. He could not understand how an ordinary human had managed to block his attack so easily. The hotel owner slowly stood back up, still refusing to believe what had just happened. Narrowing his eyes suspiciously, he claimed that Shenmue had only managed to block the attack because he was wearing some kind of defensive item. With an angry expression, he demanded that if Shenmue truly had skill, then he should stop relying on defensive gear and fight him fairly and squarely. Hearing such shameless words, Shenmue could not help but laugh. He mocked the ghost coldly, asking how a ghost could boldly challenge a human to a bare-handed fight while still having the nerve to talk about fairness. Shenmue then added that although the man had no shame, he himself still cared about saving face. As he spoke, Shenmue casually raised his hand and summoned a glowing purple token surrounded by mysterious ghost energy. Smiling faintly, he asked whether this token could really be considered defensive gear. The instant the hotel owner saw the token clearly, his expression changed completely. His eyes widened in horror as he recognized it immediately. Trembling in disbelief, he shouted that it was Ghost General William's exclusive token. Cold sweat instantly appeared on his face as panic spread through his mind. He could not understand how a mere human had managed to obtain such a terrifying item. The more he thought about it, the more frightened he became, wondering what kind of terrifying background Shenmue truly possessed. Meanwhile, Shenmue calmly held the glowing token in his hand while purple energy swirled around him. Looking at the terrified hotel owner, he smiled faintly and admitted that he still did not really know how to use the token properly. Then, with a calm but dangerous expression, he asked the ghost captain if he would be willing to teach him how to use it. The hotel owner immediately panicked and begged Shenmue not to kill him. Trembling in fear, he promised that he would disappear right away and never cause trouble again. At that moment, the terrified hotel owner instantly dropped to the floor. Without caring about his dignity, he rolled across the ground while shouting that Boss Chen's floor was dirty and that he would wipe it clean with his own body. The surrounding staff stared at Chen with admiration. One of them exclaimed in shock that Boss Chen could not only withstand a direct punch from a ghost captain, but also possessed a Ghost General tier token. To them, he was clearly no ordinary person. Another chef looked at Chen with shining eyes and declared that he was the most top-tier human he had ever seen. Meanwhile, the hotel owner slowly tried to crawl away toward the exit. A female employee asked Chen if they were really going to let him leave so easily, warning that he might secretly return to cause problems again. Just as the hotel owner thought he was finally escaping, Chen suddenly called out for him to wait. The hotel owner instantly froze in fear and nervously turned around, trembling as he asked if Boss Chen had any other orders. Chen then calmly told him that he had heard he ran a hotel and admitted that he was actually interested in it. The frightened hotel owner immediately understood what Chen wanted. Without hesitation, he quickly offered to transfer the hotel under Chen's name at a low price, begging only for his life to be spared. Chen looked at him calmly and smiled faintly. Since the hotel owner was smart enough to understand the situation, Chen said he would not take advantage of him. Paying the normal market price would be enough. The hotel owner's eyes instantly lit up with joy. He repeatedly thanked Boss Chen with an excited expression, almost treating him like a savior. Soon after, he hurriedly brought over the transfer papers and respectfully asked Chen to sign them. Chen calmly took the pen and signed the contract without hesitation. After the deal was complete, the hotel owner bowed gratefully once again. He thanked Boss Chen repeatedly before finally leaving in relief, happy that he had escaped safely. Holding the contract in his hand, Chen immediately gave a new order. He told the blonde woman to convert the entire hotel into a cafeteria branch. The woman excitedly agreed at once. Later, Chen sat inside the cafeteria and casually asked about the day's income and expenses. He wondered if they had lost money again. To his surprise, the blonde employee happily reported that not only had they avoided losing money, but they had even earned 200,000 that day. When Chen heard that the cafeteria had earned 200,000 in just a single day, he was completely shocked. He could not believe the business had gone from losing money to making a profit so quickly. The blonde employee smiled and explained that it was all thanks to a new dish developed by the head chef. She then introduced the chef to Chen. The chef politely bowed and greeted him respectfully. The employee excitedly explained that the chef had created a cold dish called ghost honey lung slices. The seasoning perfectly matched the tastes of the ghosts, and the moment the dish was launched, it immediately sold out among the diners. Hearing this, Chen was surprised. He muttered to himself, thinking that ghost honey lung slices was the same dish that would become the signature dish of the Midnight Hotel in the future. He wondered how the development speed had advanced so quickly. He looked at the chef and asked her if she had only recently created the dish. The chef quickly shook her head and explained that she had actually developed the recipe a long time ago. However, the previous owner had been a stingy miser who forced the employees to work without proper pay. Because of that, she deliberately hid the recipe until now instead of giving it to him. The chef looked at Chen with gratitude in her eyes and explained that he was completely different from the previous owner. Not only did Chen treat them fairly, but he had even paid all of her unpaid wages. Because of that, she wanted to work hard and help bring more revenue to the cafeteria. Chen scratched the back of his head awkwardly and asked what would happen if the number of customers increased too much. He wondered if the staff would end up having no time to rest. The chef and the blonde manager stared at him in confusion. To them, the idea of rest sounded strange. They innocently asked if ghosts were not supposed to work 24 hours a day. Hearing that answer, Chen immediately realized how terrible the working conditions in the ghost world were. He quickly asked Manager Li to gather all the employees because he wanted to hold a meeting with everyone. Soon, all the workers gathered inside the cafeteria and stood in front of Chen. After confirming that everyone was present, Chen smiled and announced that, to thank them for all their hard work for the Midnight Cafeteria, he had decided to introduce a brand new employee benefits system. The employees instantly became confused. Some of them asked what benefits even were, while others wondered why the boss would give them extra rewards when he was already paying wages. One employee even whispered that if the workers received both wages and benefits, then the boss would gain nothing for himself. Hearing their reactions, Chen could only force out an awkward smile. He was shocked that they had become so used to exploitation that they were now questioning basic employee treatment themselves. Manager Li quickly stepped forward and told everyone to quiet down and listen carefully to what the boss had to say. Chen then snapped his fingers and revealed a special depraved mall shopping card. He calmly announced that this card would be the new employee benefit he was giving to every worker in the cafeteria. The employees stared at the glowing cards in shock as Chen explained that each card already contained 5,000 ghost coins. On top of that, every month from now on, he would personally add another 1,000 ghost coins to them. The silver-haired female employee was instantly overwhelmed. She trembled while holding the card and exclaimed that the depraved mall was a luxury shopping center she had never even dared to enter in her entire life. At the same time, the red-haired chef became emotional and nearly burst into tears. Clutching the card tightly, he cried that he could finally return home and tell his mother that he was not a failure anymore. Manager Li looked at Chen with sparkling eyes and emotionally declared that he treated them far too well. However, Chen raised his hand and calmly stopped everyone from celebrating too early. He revealed that he was not finished announcing the new changes yet. Starting the next day, all employees' daily working hours would be reduced to only 20 hours. As for the remaining 4 hours each day, everyone would be free to rest as much as they wanted. The cafeteria employees all froze in complete silence after hearing Chen's announcement. Their minds could barely process what he had just said. Meanwhile, Chen innocently looked at everyone and wondered if the benefits he offered were still too little. The workers immediately exploded with excitement. Some of them shouted that they had worked for decades without ever hearing the word rest before. Others cried out in disbelief after realizing they could actually rest for 4 whole hours every single day. One employee even panicked, saying there was no way he could possibly spend so much free time. The red-haired chef stepped forward excitedly and loudly declared that from this day onward, he would become Chen's most loyal employee. Not wanting to fall behind, the silver-haired woman rushed forward and shouted that she wanted to join too. Watching their reactions, Chen smiled to himself and began imagining an even bigger future. He thought that once his business expanded further, he would introduce weekends, insurance benefits, housing funds, 8-hour workdays, and absolutely no overtime. In his mind, this would allow him to build a massive ghost empire. By then, all of his workers would become rare leaks that he could nurture for the future. The surrounding employees looked at him with admiration and excitement. One of them even shouted emotionally that Chen truly seemed like the reincarnation of the living king of hell, while others joked that after his death, he would definitely descend straight into the underworld's 9 springs. The red-haired chef excitedly shouted "Boss living king of hell," along with the others. Hearing those strange compliments, Chen awkwardly smiled and waved his hand. He told everyone it would be better if they simply continued calling him boss. Even though he knew they meant well, he felt that the title sounded strange no matter how he thought about it. The employees immediately agreed and shouted together, calling him boss once again. Chen then clapped his hands and ordered everyone to return to work. The workers enthusiastically obeyed without hesitation. As he watched them, Chen suddenly felt an odd sense of domination. Seeing everyone work passionately after receiving rewards made him feel strangely fascinated, almost like a ruler controlling life and death. Nearby, one of the male employees happily cleaned the cafeteria while energetically humming to himself. The floor became spotless in no time, making Chen realize that the reward system was incredibly effective at motivating everyone. Afterward, Chen turned toward Manager Li and asked her to help him find a staff dormitory where he could stay for the night. However, Manager Li blushed slightly and softly suggested that she could instead take him to her own private dormitory. Chen simply smiled calmly and agreed without overthinking it. Soon after, the two of them headed toward the entrance of the staff dormitory together. Manager Li shyly led Chen to her dormitory and softly told him that this was her room. Chen calmly opened the door and stepped inside without thinking too much about her intentions. However, just as Manager Li thought something romantic might happen between them, Chen suddenly told her to return to work first. Hearing that, her hopeful expression instantly froze. She could only awkwardly agree before watching the door close in front of her. Standing outside alone, Manager Li finally realized that Chen genuinely only wanted a place to sleep. She tearfully complained to herself that she had even thought she might spark something special with him. Meanwhile, inside the dormitory, Chen casually threw himself onto the bed and let out a tired sigh. He muttered that it was already rest time, yet everyone still wanted to keep working instead of slacking off. To him, that kind of dedication was unbelievable. The next morning arrived, and the scene shifted to Chenmu's school under a bright sunny sky. Chenmu stood outside the school building while quietly thinking about the future. He knew that this school would be invaded by ghosts that very night and would eventually transform into the famous Dark Knight High School, one of the future super elite schools. In less than half a year, the school would rise rapidly and become a top-tier academy across dozens of nearby cities. Because of that, Chenmu decided that he absolutely had to seize the opportunity to buy the school before its value skyrocketed. As he was wandering around the campus, a fat middle-aged man suddenly shouted at him from behind, asking which class he belonged to and why he was wandering around the playground instead of attending class. Chenmu slowly turned around in confusion. The moment the man saw his face clearly, his expression instantly changed in shock as he realized the young man standing before him was actually Chenmu. Chen calmly greeted him and politely asked if Director Zhang needed something from him. Director Zhang's heart immediately sank. Of all people, he had accidentally stopped the one person he absolutely did not want to offend. He nervously thought about how he had originally planned to use Chen Mu to build connections with the ghosts, but now he feared he had completely offended him instead. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he became. He regretted how he had made things difficult for Chen Mu again and again in the past, especially before Chen Mu had truly risen to power. He feared that if Chen Mu truly held a grudge, then finding a ghost to quietly kill him would be effortless. The terrifying thoughts almost made him collapse, but in the next moment he immediately forced a flattering smile onto his face. He warmly greeted Chen Mu and apologized for his lack of manners. Trying to please him, Director Zhang carefully asked whether Chen Mu thought there was anything in the school that needed improvement. Chen Mu remained calm and cold as he replied that he had no opinions. A moment later, Chen Mu casually asked if he was late. Hearing this, Director Zhang hurriedly waved his hands in panic and denied it. He blamed the unreasonable class schedule instead, and even promised to arrange for someone to change it immediately. Chen Mu smiled faintly and told him there was no need for that. He said the director should continue with his own work while he wandered around the school a little longer. Director Zhang nodded repeatedly with a cheerful grin and told Chen Mu to come find him in the office if he needed anything at all. As the director walked away with an overly friendly attitude, Chen Mu quietly observed him and immediately understood the reason for the sudden change. It was obvious that Director Zhang wanted to use him to curry favor with the ghosts. Soon after, Chen Mu arrived outside the entrance of Senior Class 1. As soon as Chen Mu stepped into Senior Class 1, he casually announced his arrival. The female teacher immediately smiled warmly when she saw him and quickly invited him inside without the slightest hint of anger. The students were instantly stunned. They could not believe that Chen Mu had been late for such a long time, yet the fierce teacher was not angry at all. Instead, she treated him with unbelievable gentleness. The students whispered among themselves, saying that Chen Mu was already a major figure capable of buying strange horror scenarios. In their eyes, even the dean of students would instantly become obedient and flattering in front of him. Chen Mu calmly told Teacher Song to continue her lecture as if nothing unusual had happened. Teacher Song nodded and instructed the students to open their textbooks to page 3. Meanwhile, the students continued gossiping in low voices. One of them wondered why someone as powerful as Chen Mu still bothered coming to class. Another student immediately scolded him, saying that ordinary people could never understand the thoughts of someone like Chen Mu. According to him, the only thing they should do was honestly focus on attending class. Just as Chen had predicted, a strange purple darkness suddenly spread across the entire school. The bright sky turned dim, and an eerie coldness filled the air. One by one, the windows around the building began glowing with crimson light, making the atmosphere feel terrifying and unnatural. Chen Mu calmly looked outside and immediately realized what was happening. The ghosts had already begun invading the school. Inside the classroom, the students shivered as an icy chill swept through the room. Some panicked and wondered why the sky had suddenly gone dark, while others nervously looked around trying to understand where the freezing cold was coming from. Before anyone could react further, a girl suddenly screamed in terror. In front of her, a system notification appeared decorated with a skull and writhing tentacles. A terrifying announcement soon appeared before everyone. The strange message declared that a weird mission deadly exam was about to begin. It warned that every examinee who had received the slip of paper would officially start the deadly exam in 10 minutes. As panic spread through the school, students and teachers rushed through the hallways in fear. One student shouted that he had not received a slip of paper and urged everyone to run. A teacher tried to calm the crowd, telling them not to panic and to let the teachers go first. Inside the classroom, despair quickly took over. One student cried out for God to save them, while another cursed his terrible luck. A frightened girl burst into tears, saying that she did not want to take the exam and did not want to die. Amid the chaos, Chen Mu remained completely calm. His classmate immediately pointed at him and declared that Chen Mu was a god. As long as everyone followed Chen Mu, they would definitely survive. The atmosphere around Chen Mu instantly changed. A blonde classmate eagerly stood behind him and asked if his strength was enough, or if he needed to push harder. Meanwhile, a blonde girl leaned forward and promised that as long as Chen Mu helped her clear the mission, she would do anything for him. Chen Mu only smiled faintly. In his eyes, the situation was simple. Poor people living in a busy city often had no one who cared about them, while those deep in the mountains at least had distant relatives. He quietly analyzed the circumstances while everyone else panicked. Soon, the rules of the exam appeared before everyone. The exam would last for 2 hours, and no one was allowed to leave the classroom during that time. A ghost was hiding among the examinees, and they had to find and kill it to pass. If the number of survivors dropped below half, the exam would immediately end, and the remaining people would be allowed to leave. However, if the ghost was not found before the time limit expired, the exam would be considered a failure, and half of the examinees would be randomly selected to lose their lives. As everyone absorbed the horrifying rules, another piece of information appeared. There was a utility knife hidden inside every desk drawer. If the knife stabbed a ghost, black smoke would emerge from the wound, revealing its identity. However, there was a dangerous catch. The moment the ghost was stabbed, it would become enraged and launch indiscriminate attacks against everyone nearby. Holding the utility knife in his hand, Chen Mu remained calm as he considered the deadly challenge before him. While the others were overwhelmed by fear, he was already thinking about how to uncover the ghost hiding among them and survive the exam. Just then, a new hint appeared before the examinees. The hint explained that the ghost looked just like a human. It had 4 limbs and could not be distinguished by appearance alone. Unless someone discovered its identity, it would generally remain motionless. The moment everyone read the clue, confusion spread through the classroom. One student asked if this was really the exam question. Others wondered how they were supposed to tell the ghost apart from ordinary people. A frightened girl pointed out that if they judged incorrectly, they would end up slaughtering innocent people. Chen Mu silently observed the reactions around him. As he recalled the events of his previous life, he realized that the rules were exactly the same. This test was designed to examine human nature. In his mind, there were only 2 ways to survive. The first was to use other people as sacrifices through trial and error. The second was to accurately identify the hidden ghost and eliminate it in a single strike. While Chen Mu was thinking, a blonde student suddenly raised his utility knife and proposed a reckless idea. Since the rules said the ghost could be identified by slashing it with a knife, he suggested that everyone simply cut one another. Whoever released black smoke would be exposed as the ghost. Before anyone could agree, another student immediately objected. He reminded everyone that the rules clearly stated that once the ghost was injured, it would launch indiscriminate attacks. Acting recklessly before confirming its identity would only put everyone in danger. The blonde student grew irritated and demanded to know what they were supposed to do instead. At that moment, another student suddenly made his move. He noticed a young woman hiding quietly in a corner and immediately pointed his knife at her. He accused her of being the disguised ghost because she had been sitting there motionless the entire time. The frightened girl trembled and desperately denied the accusation. She insisted that she was not a ghost and begged them to believe her. However, the student showed no mercy. Holding the knife tightly, he coldly declared that whether she was a ghost or not, they would know once they butchered her. However, Chen Mu stepped forward just as the student was about to attack the frightened girl. Grabbing his wrist, he coldly ordered him to return to his seat. The student glared at him angrily and mocked him. He claimed that Chen Mu had only cleared the cafeteria mission through luck, and asked whether he really thought of himself as some kind of savior. Ignoring the insult, Chen Mu calmly explained that the ghost would not take the initiative to attack. As long as nobody acted rashly, everyone was temporarily safe. The student reluctantly backed down, grumbling in frustration. Inside his mind, Chen Mu recalled the future he had experienced before. In his previous life, this mission had eventually descended into mutual slaughter. The hidden ghost was never discovered, even when the exam ended. Because of that, countless innocent people had died. This time, however, Chen Mu clenched his fists and swore that he would successfully clear the mission. As the minutes passed, he carefully studied the hint once again. At the same time, students looked through the classroom windows and noticed that the classroom across from them had already fallen into chaos. Yet despite all the commotion, it seemed they still had not found their ghost either. Time continued to slip away. Before anyone realized it, an entire hour had passed. A worried female student lowered her head and quietly said that half the exam time was already gone. If things continued like this, they would be in danger as well. Hearing those words, the male student immediately snapped at her. Nervously wiping the sweat from his face, he told her to stop talking and shut her jinxed mouth. Meanwhile, Chen Mu remained focused on the clue written on the board. The hint stated that the ghost looked like a human, had 4 limbs, and generally would not move until it was discovered. Chen Mu narrowed his eyes as he repeated the key phrase in his mind. Then a realization slowly began to form. Just moments earlier, every single classmate in the classroom had already left their seats. Not a single person had remained where they originally sat. As that thought surfaced, Shenmu's gaze swept across the classroom. He felt that he had finally found a crucial flaw hidden within the hint, and he began piecing together the truth behind the ghost's identity. His eyes landed on a girl sitting quietly at her desk. A sudden thought flashed through his mind. Could it be her? The more he thought about it, the more everything began to make sense. His eyes widened as realization struck him. He understood now. Just then, a broadcast echoed from the speaker system. Class 3 had failed the exam. As punishment, half of the surviving students had been eliminated. The announcement sent a wave of panic through the classroom. Several students immediately turned pale. One shouted that it was over, while another cried that they were all going to be trapped there until they died. The student who had been causing trouble earlier quickly pointed at Shenmu and demanded an answer. He wanted to know what Shenmu had to say now that another class had already failed. However, Shenmu remained calm. Walking toward the girl sitting at her desk, he told everyone not to panic because he had already found the ghost. The girl slowly raised her head in shock. Her eyes widened as she stared at him, unable to believe what she had just heard. The surrounding students were equally stunned. One of them immediately asked whether Wang Fang was really the ghost. After all, Chen Mo had just saved her from being attacked earlier. The student's expression instantly brightened. Laughing loudly, he claimed that he had been right all along. He urged Shenmu to stop wasting time and slash her with the knife immediately. Meanwhile, Wang Fang's face turned pale as tears streamed down her cheeks. Trembling in fear, she desperately insisted that she was not the ghost. She begged Shenmu to believe her, repeating over and over that it really was not her. Without saying a word, Shenmu raised the utility knife in his hand. Everyone in the classroom froze. The students stared in shock, unable to understand what he was planning to do. Then, in a single swift motion, Shenmu swung the knife downward. However, instead of slashing Wang Fang, the blade plunged directly into the desk in front of her. Wang Fang instinctively recoiled in fear, crossing her arms in front of her body. When she realized she had not been attacked, confusion filled her eyes. The others were equally stunned. The student who was causing trouble immediately shouted at Shenmu, demanding to know what he was doing. He reminded him that he had been told to slash Wang Fang and questioned why he had stabbed the desk instead. A faint smile appeared on Shenmu's face. He calmly told everyone not to panic. Then he pointed at the knife and told them to look carefully. At first, nobody understood what he meant, but a moment later, black smoke suddenly began pouring out from the desk where the utility knife had been embedded. Dark tendrils twisted and spread through the air like living shadows. The entire classroom fell silent. Everyone stared at the horrifying sight in disbelief. As the black smoke dissipated, a grotesque, ghostly form emerged from the shattered desk before rapidly breaking apart and vanishing into nothingness. Wang Fang collapsed onto the floor in shock. Her eyes were wide with fear as she stared at the remains of the creature. Trembling, she shouted that it really was a ghost. The other students were equally stunned. The student stared at the scene in disbelief and finally realized the truth. In a shocked voice, he exclaimed that the desk had actually been the ghost all along. At that moment, a mechanical voice echoed through the classroom. It announced that Class 1's Chen Mu had successfully found the target. The exam was officially passed and all members had survived. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then the entire class erupted into celebration. The students cheered excitedly. Some hugged each other, while others jumped around in relief. After spending so long trapped in fear, they could finally breathe again. Everyone knew they had survived because of Chen Mu. Soon, several students gathered around him. They excitedly asked how he had figured out that the ghost was actually the desk. One student admitted that everyone had assumed the ghost had disguised itself as a human from the very beginning. Chen Mu calmly explained that the answer was actually simple. According to him, there had been a word trap hidden inside the rules. The students looked at him in confusion and asked what he meant by a word trap. Chen Mu pointed toward the hint displayed on the board and explained that the rules only stated that the ghost had 4 limbs like a human. However, nowhere did it say that the ghost had to be human. Chen Mu explained that everyone had subconsciously assumed the ghost had transformed into a human. That mistaken assumption had completely led them astray, and in his previous life, had even caused people to turn on one another and kill each other. He then pointed out the most important clue. The hint had clearly stated that the ghost would not move on its own before being discovered. Throughout the entire ordeal, every person in the classroom had changed positions at some point. Even the desks and chairs had been bumped, pushed, or shifted around during the chaos. However, there was one exception. Chen Mu revealed that a single desk had remained perfectly aligned from beginning to end. Even when Wang Feng sat beside it, the desk had not moved a single millimeter. That was what convinced him that it was the hidden ghost. Hearing the explanation, the others were stunned. One student praised Chen Mu, saying it was incredible that he had managed to stay so calm in such a terrifying situation. Chen Mu remained silent. After a moment, he reminded everyone that the mission was over and advised them to leave the school as soon as possible. The entire campus had already been subjected to a ghost invasion, and there was no reason to stay any longer. The students immediately agreed. They said the big brother was right, and admitted that they did not want to remain there and risk being eaten by ghosts. One after another, they hurried to leave the classroom. As Chen Mu walked through the blood-stained corridor, his expression became serious. He thought that his class had been fortunate, but the same could not be said for the others. This strange apocalypse was far too unreasonable and cruel. In his previous life, countless people had died during the opening stages of the ghost invasion. Stepping over pools of blood, Chen Mu reflected that even among those who had survived, many were no longer normal people. The horrors they had witnessed had changed them forever. Chen Mu walked through the blood-stained corridor and stopped in front of the principal's office. Without hesitation, he pushed open the door and politely announced his arrival. Inside the room sat a burly ghost in a suit behind a large desk. The ghost stared at him with glowing red eyes and immediately asked if he was the only human who had passed the exam. The principal's expression darkened as he questioned how Chen Mu could walk into the office so casually. A faint smile appeared on Chen Mu's face. He calmly replied that he had come to discuss business. The ghost snorted coldly. He warned Chen Mu not to think too highly of himself just because he had managed to survive. In the principal's eyes, humans were nothing more than food. Chen Mu had only escaped death because he had cleverly used the rules to find a way to survive. However, before the principal could respond, Chen Mu told him not to refuse too quickly because he had prepared a meeting gift for him. With a wave of his hand, a large stack of ghost coins appeared on the desk. The pile was so enormous that it contained at least tens of thousands of ghost coins. The sight immediately caught the principal's attention. The principal suddenly changed his tone. After a brief pause, the principal looked at Chen Mu more carefully and asked if he was student Chen Mu. Then the principal introduced himself. He revealed that he was the principal of Dark Knight School. While eating at the midnight cafeteria, he had heard many other ghosts mention Chen Mu's name. A faint smile appeared on Chen Mu's face as he calmly admitted that he was indeed the person the principal was talking about. The principal immediately became much more enthusiastic. He praised Chen Mu, saying he had not expected him to be not only intelligent but also so wealthy. In his eyes, Chen Mu was truly a remarkable young man. With a friendly expression, the principal pushed a cup toward him and proudly introduced it as a fine tea he had treasured for decades. He warmly invited Chen Mu to have a taste. Chen Mu smiled and said that since the principal was being so polite, he should also show some sincerity in return. With a casual wave of his hand, several expensive bottles of collectible red wine appeared on the table. The principal's eyes instantly lit up as he rushed toward them like a man who had discovered a priceless treasure. He carefully picked up one of the bottles and examined it with excitement. To his surprise, it was a collectible red wine from the depraved mall. However, his attention was soon drawn to another item lying among the bottles. The principal's expression changed dramatically when he spotted it. His eyes widened in disbelief as he recognized it as a Ghost General's token. He could hardly believe that Chen Mu possessed a keepsake belonging to a Ghost General. Chen Mu calmly picked up the token and apologized, saying that he had accidentally dropped one of his personal belongings. The principal swallowed nervously as he watched him retrieve the token. At that moment, everything suddenly became clear to him. He realized that the item was indeed a Ghost General's token. No wonder Chen Mu had been so fearless from the beginning. It turned out that he had a powerful Ghost General backing him. The principal held his teacup and looked at Chen Mu with curiosity. After everything that had happened, he finally asked what kind of business Chen Mu wanted to discuss with him. Chen Mu smiled calmly and dropped a shocking proposal. He said that he wanted to buy Dark Knight School for 100 million. The principal had just taken a sip of tea when he heard those words. He instantly sprayed the tea out in shock, nearly choking on it. After recovering, the principal stared at him suspiciously and asked if he was joking. Chen Mu shook his head and replied that he was completely serious. He genuinely wanted to purchase the school. The principal frowned and explained that the school's market value was less than 50 million. He could not understand why Chen Mu was willing to pay twice its worth. Chen Mu simply smiled and pointed out that if the school was worth less than 50 million, then the principal had even less reason to refuse his offer. Hearing that, the principal fell silent and began thinking deeply. Chen Mu, however, was already looking far into the future. He knew that once the weird apocalypse fully descended, noble ghosts would fight desperately for enrollment quotas for their children. Dark Night School would become an extremely valuable asset. If he could buy it now for 100 million, the returns in the future would be unimaginable. To Chen Mu, this was not a loss at all. Instead, it was an investment that would bring endless opportunities once the ghost world truly expanded. Principal Qian looked at Chen Mu with a serious expression. Although he was tempted by the offer, he still had one concern. He admitted that he did not doubt Chen Mu's intentions, but 100 million ghost coins was an enormous amount. He wanted to know whether Chen Mu could really produce that kind of money. Chen Mu smiled confidently and told him not to worry. He said that he had many flaws, but lacking money was not one of them. The moment those words fell, a massive amount of ghost coins appeared before them. Principal Qian's eyes instantly widened. His entire body trembled as he stared at the mountain of money surrounding him. Countless ghost coins glittered in every direction, leaving him completely stunned. He could barely form words as he looked around in disbelief. Meanwhile, Chen Mu sat comfortably in his chair and calmly asked whether this was enough. After recovering from the shock, Principal Qin took a deep breath and admitted that Chen Mu was indeed wealthy enough to buy the school. However, despite acknowledging his financial power, Principal Qian still shook his head and said that he could not sell Dark Night School to him. Chen Mu's expression immediately changed. Confused, he stared at the principal and asked a simple question: why? Chen Mu listened carefully as the acting principal explained the situation. The principal admitted that he was only the acting head of Dark Night High School. The school itself actually belonged to a mysterious school director. He further revealed that the ghosts who controlled the school hated humans deeply, and because of that hatred, they had established 2 special rules regarding the sale of the school. Hearing this, Chen Mu became curious and asked about the special rules. The principal explained that the first rule was surprisingly favorable to humans. If a human buyer wanted to purchase Dark Night High School, they only needed to pay 1/10 of the school's market value. The generous condition immediately made Chen Mu suspicious. He knew there was no such thing as a free lunch and felt certain that there had to be a hidden catch. Seeing Chen Mu's reaction, the principal let out a sigh. Although he was not supposed to reveal confidential information, he decided to make an exception because they had already become friends. Leaning closer, he quietly disclosed the second rule. Any human who signed the purchase contract would be instantly obliterated the moment the contract was completed. After hearing the explanation, Chen Mu immediately understood the scheme. The ghosts deliberately used the first rule to tempt humans with an unbelievably cheap price. Once someone took the bait and signed the contract, the second rule would activate, killing the buyer instantly. In the end, the ghosts would keep both the property and the money. He could not help but remark on how sinister and ruthless the arrangement was. The principal nodded helplessly and explained that this was exactly why he had refused to sell the school. It was not because he did not want Chen Mu to buy it, but because purchasing it would certainly lead to his death. However, instead of backing down, Chen Mu simply smiled. Despite knowing the danger, he calmly declared that he still intended to buy Dark Night High School. The acting principal was completely baffled by Chen Mu's decision. He urgently warned him once again that signing the contract would undoubtedly result in death. However, Chen Mu remained calm and confident. With a faint smile on his face, he simply instructed the principal to bring the contract over. Seeing that Chen Mu refused to change his mind, the principal could only shake his head helplessly. Inwardly, he concluded that Chen Mu was a wealthy fool whose brain did not function properly. Since all warnings had been ignored, he produced the purchase contract and placed it before him. Without the slightest hesitation, Chen Mu picked up a pen and signed his name on the document. The moment the signature was completed, a violent reaction erupted. Dark purple energy surged out of the contract and gathered into a massive vortex above the room. The sinister power twisted through the air, radiating an aura capable of destroying everything in its path. The principal looked at the terrifying phenomenon and sighed with regret. He felt that it was a pity for someone as young and promising as Chen Mu to throw away his future so recklessly. In his eyes, Chen Mu's fate had already been decided. Yet Chen Mu showed no fear at all. Sitting calmly in his chair, he told the principal not to speak too soon. As soon as the deadly force descended toward him, a brilliant golden light suddenly burst forth from his body. The golden radiance collided head-on with the dark energy, filling the entire room with dazzling light. To the principal's shock, Chen Mu remained completely unharmed. Bathed in golden brilliance, he stood there with a confident smile, as if he had expected this outcome from the very beginning. The supposedly unavoidable death sentence had failed to claim him. The acting principal stared at Chen Mu in complete shock. He could not believe that Chen Mu had actually survived the power of the rules. In all his years, he had never seen anyone resist such an absolute force. Unable to contain his astonishment, he demanded to know how Chen Mu had managed to do it. Chen Mu simply smiled and casually explained that he possessed a special item capable of countering the power of the rules. Hearing that explanation, the principal immediately recalled a legendary treasure from the ghost world. According to rumors, only Duke William possessed a unique piece of defensive equipment powerful enough to resist the authority of the rules. The principal instantly connected the dots and concluded that the Ghost General token Chen Mu had obtained earlier must actually belong to Duke William. Ignoring the principal's shock, Chen Mu looked at the signed contract in his hand and asked whether the purchase had been successfully completed. He wanted to know if that meant he had officially become the new director of Dark Knight High School. The principal quickly recovered from his surprise and immediately confirmed it. With a respectful attitude, he addressed Chen Mu as Director Chen and even invited him to take the director's seat of honor. However, Chen Mu waved his hand and politely declined. He admitted that he was not good at management and had no interest in handling the school's daily affairs. Instead, he ordered the principal to continue serving as the acting principal and manage the school as before. The principal was overjoyed by the decision. Feeling both grateful and honored, he vowed that he would never disappoint Director Chen's expectations. In his eyes, Chen Mu had not only become the owner of the school but also a superior worthy of his loyalty. After settling the matter, Chen Mu immediately gave his first order as the new director. He instructed the principal to notify all teachers and staff members and have them gather at the playground within 10 minutes. The principal respectfully accepted the command without hesitation and bowed deeply before hurrying off to carry out the order. 10 minutes later, the playground of Dark Knight High School was filled with teachers, staff members, and students. The sudden order to gather had left everyone confused. As they stood beneath the crimson sky, whispers spread through the crowd. Many were shocked to learn that the school had been sold and that a new director had already arrived. The abrupt change left them both nervous and curious. The acting principal soon stepped onto the stage and raised his voice for silence. He instructed everyone to quiet down and prepare to welcome the new school director. The crowd immediately focused their attention on the stage as anticipation filled the air. With a respectful gesture, the principal introduced the new director. To everyone's astonishment, the person who stepped forward was none other than Chen Mu. The moment his identity was revealed, the entire playground erupted in shock. Many teachers recognized him instantly as the human student who had solved the school's challenge earlier that day. The ghosts and staff members were even more stunned. They could hardly believe that the new owner of Dark Knight High School was not only a human but also one of the school's own students. Several female staff members immediately turned pale. They remembered creating dangerous missions specifically designed to kill human participants and began worrying that Chen Mu might seek revenge now that he had become their superior. Some even wondered if it was still possible to resign before disaster struck. Ignoring the panic spreading through the crowd, Chen Mu calmly accepted the microphone. Looking across the assembled teachers, staff, and students, he announced that Dark Knight High School now belonged to him. His voice carried throughout the playground, making it clear that he was officially the school's new master. After establishing his authority, Chen Mu explained the purpose of the gathering. He stated that he had called everyone together for only 3 reasons. Hearing this, the crowd immediately fell silent and waited attentively, eager to learn what their new director intended to do next. Standing before the crowd with a smile, Chen Mu finally revealed the first of the 3 things he wanted to announce. To everyone's surprise, it was not a punishment or a warning. Instead, he declared that all teaching staff would receive a pay raise. More than that, their salaries would be doubled starting immediately. For a moment, the entire playground fell silent. Then excitement exploded throughout the crowd. The teachers and staff could hardly believe what they had heard. They had been worried that Shenmue would seek revenge for the dangerous missions they had created for humans, yet instead of retaliation, he was rewarding them with better pay and benefits. In their eyes, Shenmue no longer looked like an ordinary school director. He seemed more like a benevolent ruler who had descended to change their lives. Shenmue was not finished yet. Seeing the crowd's excitement, he announced another benefit. Every employee would now enjoy a 4-hour break every day. The news left everyone even more stunned. Before they could recover from that shock, he revealed a third reward. All employees of Dark Knight High School would be allowed to eat for free at the midnight cafeteria. The playground instantly erupted into cheers. Teachers and staff members waved their arms excitedly as if they had just received a blessing from heaven. Many shouted praises for Director Chen, while some became so overwhelmed with admiration that they openly declared their loyalty to him. Within moments, Shenmue's popularity had skyrocketed among the school's employees. After allowing the celebration to continue for a while, Shenmue raised his hand and revealed the only condition attached to these generous benefits. He stated that within 1 month, everyone had to work together to transform Dark Knight High School into the top school in the entire industry. Rather than being discouraged by the challenge, the staff members became even more motivated. One teacher immediately stepped forward and confidently promised that within a month she would raise the school's average score in foreign ghost language to 140. Others also looked eager to prove themselves and meet their new director's expectations. Satisfied with their enthusiasm, Shenmue smiled and announced that he had finished speaking. He stated that the remaining matters would be handled by the principal. After finishing his speech, Shenmue stepped down from the stage. The principal respectfully told him to take care and reminded him that he could call for assistance whenever he needed anything. At the same time, the gathered staff and students enthusiastically bid farewell to Director Chen, treating him with a level of respect that had not existed before. Once Shenmue left, the principal immediately announced another surprise. He informed everyone that Director Chen had already arranged dinner for the entire staff and instructed them to head to the midnight cafeteria together. The crowd instantly became excited and eager to see what kind of meal awaited them. However, not everyone shared their enthusiasm. One skeptical employee mocked the others for celebrating too early. He argued that there was no reason to expect luxurious food and claimed that the cafeteria would probably serve nothing more than leftover blood meals from other places. His words caused some people to hesitate. A few employees reluctantly admitted that his reasoning sounded believable. One woman even recalled her mother's advice that nothing free was ever truly good. Yet despite those concerns, others quickly brushed aside the doubts. They pointed out that Shenmue had already provided generous salaries, extra breaks, and numerous benefits. Compared to those rewards, enduring a mediocre meal seemed like a trivial matter. As the discussion continued, the optimistic employees became increasingly convinced that Shenmue deserved their trust. Meanwhile, the skeptics remained unconvinced. One of them openly stated that he simply could not believe a human could be so kind-hearted without having some hidden motive. Despite the disagreement, the crowd gradually moved toward the midnight cafeteria. As the staff entered the midnight cafeteria, a group of skeptical employees still worried that the promised dinner might be a trap. They nervously asked the manager whether the cafeteria was planning to serve poor-quality food at outrageous prices. However, their doubts vanished the moment they saw the dining table. It was covered with luxurious dishes that sparkled under the lights, looking far beyond anything they had expected. The manager calmly explained that they had misunderstood the situation. She revealed that the feast in front of them was simply the standard meal prepared by the boss for the teaching staff. Hearing this left the skeptics speechless. Some employees immediately mocked the doubters, pointing out that the food was already laid out before their eyes, yet they still questioned Director Chen's sincerity. The staff eagerly examined the dishes and quickly recognized them as expensive delicacies. There were ghost honey lung slices, sweet and sour ghost fish, soul-returning meat, and several other famous dishes that were normally difficult to obtain. Everyone became excited, realizing that Director Chen had truly spared no expense for them. One female employee was especially thrilled. Delighted by her good fortune, she declared that she had to show off having such an incredible superior. She immediately took out her phone and snapped photos of herself with the luxurious meal before posting them online. In her post, she proudly praised the food and joked that although she would gain weight from eating meals like this every day, she did not care at all. The post instantly attracted attention. Comments flooded in from jealous viewers who could hardly believe what they were seeing. Some questioned whether her boss had gone crazy, while others jokingly asked if the school was still hiring because they were willing to work endlessly for benefits like these. The discussion quickly became lively as more and more people reacted with envy. Outside, several ghosts stared at the photos in disbelief. One of them repeatedly complained that he could not even finish reading the comments because the jealousy was overwhelming. Meanwhile, the employee's livestream continued attracting viewers as she happily showed off the magnificent feast prepared by director Chen. As the employee's post continued spreading across the internet, even more ghosts became jealous after seeing the luxurious treatment offered by Dark Night School. One muscular ghost stared at the photos on his phone and admitted that the benefits were so good that he wanted to join as well. However, before he could continue dreaming, his boss immediately scolded him. The boss pointed out that with conditions that generous, there was no chance a place like that would hire ghosts who had not even finished basic ghost education. The boss continued lecturing his subordinates. He reminded them that they could barely afford enough food to survive, so they should stop fantasizing and focus on doing their current jobs properly. The two ghosts lowered their heads in disappointment after being reprimanded. At that moment, the boss suddenly noticed a young human walking alone in the distance. One of the ghosts immediately pointed at him and remarked that the human looked extremely easy to fool. Hearing that, the boss's eyes lit up. He quickly decided that this was the perfect opportunity to promote their newest loan package. Without wasting any time, the group prepared to approach their potential customer. Meanwhile, the human they had spotted was none other than Chen Mu. Completely unaware of their intentions, he walked calmly down the street with his hands in his pockets. In his mind, the problems at Dark Night School had already been settled successfully. Feeling satisfied with the outcome, he began thinking about his next goal. Now that the school was under control, he planned to purchase a luxurious mansion and finally start enjoying a comfortable life. As Chen Mu walked down the street, the three ghosts quickly stepped in front of him with bright smiles and enthusiastically introduced their microloan service. One of them asked whether he would like to learn about their loan packages. Chen Mu did not even slow down. He calmly refused and stated that he had no interest in borrowing money. The ghosts were unwilling to give up so easily. They immediately began promoting what they claimed was a generous discount. According to them, borrowing 100,000 only required paying 100 in monthly interest. They urged Chen Mu to reconsider because the offer sounded incredibly attractive. However, Chen Mu instantly saw through the scheme. With a faint smile, he pointed out that the 100,000 being lent was human currency, while the repayment required ghost coins. He further explained that anyone unable to repay on time would likely be forcibly executed. In his eyes, the so-called loan was nothing more than a deadly trap. The three ghosts froze in shock. They had never expected a human to understand the hidden mechanism behind their scam. At the same time, their leader sensed something unusual about Chen Mu. After carefully observing him, he concluded that the aura surrounding Chen Mu was far from ordinary. Realizing they might have encountered someone dangerous, he immediately ordered the others to leave before trouble started. The ghosts quickly abandoned their sales pitch and prepared to retreat. One of them even waved goodbye as they hurried away. Chen Mu, however, suddenly called out and told them to wait. His unexpected response instantly made the three ghosts nervous. They turned around cautiously and demanded to know what he wanted. Chen Mu calmly studied the group. Judging from their strength, all three were at the ghost captain level. That made them more than capable of handling ordinary threats. He immediately realized that they would be perfect candidates to serve as security guards for Dark Night School. Not only could they help maintain order on campus, but they could also assist in keeping the midnight cafeteria running smoothly. The leader of the three ghosts remained cautious. He warned Chen Mu that although he might be powerful, the three of them were not weaklings who could be pushed around easily. Chen Mu immediately clarified that they had misunderstood his intentions. Looking at their sturdy physiques, he sincerely asked whether they would be interested in working under him. The proposal left the three ghosts completely stunned. One of them turned to the leader in disbelief and wondered whether they had somehow become so outstanding that even headhunters were seeking them out. The leader, equally confused, admitted that he had no idea what was happening. Despite their surprise, the ghosts quickly grew suspicious. Convinced that Chen Mu was trying to trick them, they firmly rejected the offer. One ghost boldly declared that even if the three brothers starved to death, they would never work for a human. Another immediately agreed, proudly proclaiming that ghosts would never become slaves. Chen Mu could not help but sigh. He remarked that it was truly a pity because he had specially prepared a generous offer for them. The position came with a monthly salary of 10,000, along with free room and board. Seeing their determination, he casually stated that since they were unwilling, he would not force them and began to walk away. The moment the ghosts heard the salary figure, their expressions changed dramatically. One of them hurriedly stopped Chen Mu and asked whether the 10,000 monthly salary was paid in ghost currency rather than human currency. Chen Mu glanced back at them and calmly replied that he had no interest in using the cheap tricks they themselves relied on. Unlike their loan scams, his offer was genuine. The moment Chen Mu confirmed that the salary was real, the three ghosts immediately abandoned all their previous pride. Bowing deeply, they begged him to enslave them as much as he wanted and eagerly accepted his offer. Chen Mu handed each of them an employee card from Dark Knight High School. He explained that with the card, they would be able to enjoy large meals in the school cafeteria completely free of charge. The three ghosts were overwhelmed with joy. They repeatedly thanked their new boss before happily running off while clutching their precious employee cards. Watching them leave, Chen Mu smiled in satisfaction. He believed that with the three ghost captains guarding the area, ordinary ghosts would no longer dare cause trouble at either Dark Knight High School or the cafeteria. The arrangement would greatly improve security and help maintain order. Afterward, Chen Mu made a phone call and instructed Skeleton Driver to pick him up at the entrance of Dark Knight High School. Skeleton Drive on the other end immediately acknowledged the order and promised to arrive at once. About 10 minutes later, a vehicle rushed through the streets and stopped in front of him. Chen Mu calmly approached and got into the car. The skeleton politely asked where he wished to go. Chen Mu answered that he wanted to go to Shanshui Courtyard. Upon hearing the destination, the skeleton driver immediately agreed and prepared to drive him there. After arriving at Shanzib Courtyard, Chen Mu saw that the entire residential area was covered by a massive purple barrier. Strange ghostly flames floated around the perimeter, and an invisible force seemed to protect every corner of the community. The skeleton chauffeur carefully drove the car to the entrance before stopping. The skeleton respectfully informed Chen Mu that the area was protected by the power of rules. Because of those restrictions, the ghost vehicle could not enter the community. Hearing this, Chen Mu became interested. He observed that no matter how powerful a visitor might be, anyone who wished to enter had to obey the established rules. In his opinion, only a place with such strict security measures could truly be called absolutely safe. After opening the car door, Chen Mu told the skeleton driver that he could leave and that he would enter alone. The skeleton immediately agreed and drove away, leaving Chen Mu standing before the enormous barrier. Chen Mu gazed at the strange scene in front of him. As he reached out and touched the surface of the barrier, he wondered how he was supposed to trigger the unusual scenario connected to the community. Before he could think further, a woman suddenly approached him from inside the protected area. She was dressed like a professional real estate agent and politely asked whether he was looking for a house. The appearance of the woman immediately caught Chen Mu's attention. After sensing her presence, he realized with surprise that she was actually a living human. Chen Mu arrived near the mysterious property, surrounded by a glowing purple rule shield and floating ghostly flames. A woman approached him and politely asked whether he was looking to buy a house. Chen Mu confirmed that he was. The woman handed him the business card for the property and asked him to take it. The moment the card passed through the barrier, Chen Mu realized something strange. He wondered how an ordinary business card could actually pass through the rule shield. After receiving the card, the shield suddenly opened. Chen Mu quickly understood the rule behind the place. Only those who received the business card were allowed to enter, which explained why the shield had opened for him. However, when the woman turned and started leaving, Chen Mu became confused and asked why she was not going to accompany him to view the houses. The woman then revealed the truth. She had been trapped there, and if Chen Mu had not arrived, she would never have been able to leave. She told him to pray that someone else came to take his place, because only then would he be able to escape as well. Chen Mu finally realized that he had become her scapegoat. The woman had used him to free herself from the rule shield's trap. After she vanished, the illusion around him began to disappear. The beautiful residential community faded away, revealing the true appearance of Shanshui Courtyard. Instead of neat houses and clean streets, the place was completely run down, overgrown, and filled with eerie purple flames. Chen Mu realized that he had been fooled by the illusion created by the rule shield. Looking around the ruined courtyard, he grew frustrated. Everything was so broken and abandoned that he could not even figure out where the sales office was. As Chen Mu stood alone in the haunted courtyard, a strange voice suddenly called him a stupid human. A mustached man appeared before Chen Mu and told him that he would not be able to find the exit, advising him to simply stay there honestly. However, Chen Mu calmly explained that the man had misunderstood him. He had not been worrying about escaping. Instead, he had been thinking about how rundown the villa area was and wondering how long it would take to restore everything after buying the entire place. Hearing this, the mustached man became suspicious. He thought Chen Mu was strange for wandering into such a weird scenario without showing any fear. Instead of being nervous, Chen Mu was actually thinking about buying a villa. The man even wondered whether Chen Mu was deliberately playing with him. The mustached man then asked Chen Mu whether he knew how much money it would cost to buy the estate. Without hesitation, he declared that the price was 50 million ghost coins and told Chen Mu to stop daydreaming. Chen Mu remained completely calm. Rather than being shocked by the price, he smiled and asked if it was only 50 million. The mustached man was stunned by his reaction. Chen Mu then casually announced that he would take the entire estate. With a simple snap of his fingers, a massive pile of ghost coins appeared in front of them, glowing brightly in the eerie courtyard. The mustached man was shocked. He had never expected a human to take out so many ghost coins so easily. Realizing that Chen Mu was extremely rich, he immediately began calculating how to profit from him. In his mind, Hu Wan decided that he had to fleece Chen Mu properly, because earning anything less would feel like taking a loss. Chen Mu looked at him calmly and asked whether there was any problem. Since the price had already been settled, he suggested that they sign the contract. Hu Wan quickly stopped Chen Mu and explained that the previous price had only been a random number meant to test his financial strength. Since Chen Mu had already proven that he truly had the capital, Hu Wan said he would now reveal the actual price. Chen Mu remained calm and simply told him to say it. Hu Wan then announced that buying the entire Shanshui courtyard would require 1 billion ghost coins. The price was far higher than before, and Chen Mu immediately understood that Hu Wan was trying to rip him off like an easy target. Since Hu Wan was being dishonest first, Chen Mu decided that there was no need to treat him fairly either. Instead of arguing, Chen Mu smiled and said that money was not a problem. However, he asked whether he could invite 2 friends to his new home as guests. Hu Wan agreed without hesitation. He then handed Chen Mu 2 invitation cards and explained how they worked. As long as Chen Mu spoke the invitation words, the cards would automatically fly into the hands of the people he had in mind. Chen Mu accepted the cards and activated them. He introduced himself as Chen Mu, then declared through the invitation that the boss of Shanshui Courtyard was giving the entire estate to him for free. After that, he invited his friends to visit his new home immediately. The 2 invitation cards glowed with purple light and shot into the sky. Hearing Chen Mu's words, Hu Wan was instantly stunned. He angrily questioned when he had ever agreed to give the entire estate away for free, wondering if he had been kicked in the head by a donkey to make such a ridiculous decision. Chen Mu calmly told Hu Wan that his friends would arrive shortly. Seeing the pile of ghost coins, Hu Wan quickly pointed at it and said that they could treat the 50 million ghost coins as the deposit for the full 1 billion ghost coin price. However, Chen Mu stopped him and told him not to be so hasty. According to the proper procedure, Hu Wan should first show him around the estate before discussing payment. Hu Wan hesitated for a moment, but in the end he agreed. As they walked through the eerie Shanshui courtyard surrounded by purple ghost flames, Hu Wan casually asked Chen Mu who the friends he had invited were. He also wanted to know whether they were as wealthy as Chen Mu. Chen Mu replied indifferently, saying that they were all right and were merely some rich idlers. He told Hu Wan that he would understand once they arrived. Hearing this, Hu Wan secretly became excited. In his mind, he thought that this was a perfect opportunity. If Chen Mu's friends were also rich, he might be able to fleece another large sum from them. Trying to push the deal forward, Hu Wan brought Chen Mu to a ruined building and proudly introduced it as the crown jewel of Shanshui Courtyard. He claimed that as long as Chen Mu paid the deposit first, he could move in immediately. Chen Mu still refused to rush. He told Hu Wan that it would not be too late to buy the house after his friends arrived. He added that if Hu Wan still insisted on charging 1 billion ghost coins at that time, he would pay every single cent. Since Chen Mu had already said that, Hu Wan forced himself to remain patient. He smiled and agreed to wait a little longer. While Chen Mu and Hu Wan waited inside Shanshui Courtyard, Strange sounds echoed through the eerie estate. Soon after, Hu Wan realized that Chen Mo's invited guests had arrived. He immediately told Chen Mo that they should go to the entrance to greet them. Chen Mu calmly agreed and said that he would have to trouble Boss Hu to lead the way. Hu Wan led Chen Mu toward the Shen Shui courtyard sales office. The place was still surrounded by purple ghost flames, and the atmosphere remained gloomy and unsettling. When they entered the sales office, Hu Wan suddenly saw a woman standing inside. The moment he recognized her, he was shocked. She was Manager Sun of the Depraved Mall. Hu Wan immediately became confused. The Depraved Mall was a top-tier ghost faction in the city, so he could not understand why someone like Manager Sun would personally come to Shanshui Courtyard. Manager Sun respectfully greeted Chen Mu and revealed his identity. She said that Chen Mu was the supreme black gold client of the Depraved Mall. To congratulate him on moving into his new home, the mall had specially prepared a 1,000-year ghost jade as a gift for him. Hu Wan was completely stunned. He could not believe that Chen Mu was actually a black gold client of the Depraved Mall. Even Hu Wan himself could not obtain an ordinary membership card, yet Chen Mu had the highest level status. Realizing this, Hu Wan instantly became nervous. He began to panic, wondering if he had offended someone far more powerful than he had imagined. He felt as though he had kicked an iron plate and decided that it would be wiser to back down before things became worse. Changing his attitude, Hu Wan forced a polite smile and said that since Chen Mu and Manager Sun were friends, he could offer Chen Mu a discount. He then suggested reducing the original price by 50%. Chen Mu smiled at Hu Wan and reminded him not to be so hasty again. His second friend had not arrived yet. At that moment, strange cries echoed outside the sales office. A flock of black birds flew across the blood-red sky, and the eerie purple flames around Shanshui Courtyard burned even brighter. Suddenly, a powerful purple aura erupted inside the sales office. Hu Wan turned toward the overwhelming energy in shock. Feeling the pressure from the aura, he wondered whether the newcomer could actually be a ghost general. A tall blonde man then walked out from the glowing light and casually asked whether he was late. The newcomer approached Chen Mu with a smile and congratulated him on moving into his new home. Chen Mu's second friend had finally arrived. When Hu Wan recognized him, he was completely stunned. The man was Duke William. Hu Wan could hardly believe that even Duke William was Chen Mu's friend. Duke William hurried over without stopping as soon as he received Chen Mu's message. After greeting him warmly, he asked whether he had missed anything important. Chen Mu assured him that he had arrived at exactly the right moment for a good show. Chen Mu then introduced Duke William to the mustached man, explaining that he was the owner of Shanshui Courtyard. The courtyard's owner immediately stepped forward and politely greeted Duke William. He claimed that he had heard a great deal about him and considered it an honor to finally meet him. Duke William shook his hand and jokingly praised him for being generous enough to give an entire courtyard to Chen Mu's brother. The owner quickly shook his head and nervously explained that Chen Mu must have misunderstood him because he had never intended to give away the courtyard. Hearing this, Duke William questioned why the man had not objected when the invitation letter had been sent earlier. Chen Mu also looked at him and demanded an explanation. Caught between them, the owner anxiously clarified that he had only meant to give Chen Mu the entire courtyard and all its surrounding parking spaces. His words immediately left him sweating because he knew the property was worth an enormous amount of money. Chen Mu leaned closer and reminded him that the selling price of Shanshui Courtyard alone was 1 billion ghost coins. Realizing that Chen Mu clearly remembered the price, the owner hurriedly claimed that he had only been joking because Chen Mu possessed such a wonderful sense of humor. However, Chen Mu soon produced the official ownership contract. He calmly revealed that he had already completely won over Shanshui Courtyard. As a token of respect, he declared that he would voluntarily offer Duke William all 47 villas and their parking spaces. The courtyard's owner immediately dropped to his knees and held out the contract with trembling hands. Faced with Chen Mu and Duke William together, he knew he could not afford to offend either of them. If he refused to cooperate, he feared that he might lose his wealth, and possibly even his life, right then and there. Chen Mu accepted the courtyard owner's offer without hesitation. With a faint smile, he thanked Boss Hu for his generosity and respectfully accepted Shanshui Courtyard. He then took a pen and signed the ownership contract. The moment the agreement was completed, the power contained within the contract entered Chen Mu's body. With the Midnight Hotel, Dark Knight High School, and now the blessing of Shanshui Courtyard under his control, his strength rose to the level of a mid-tier ghost captain. Boss Hu forced himself to remain polite and informed Chen Mu that Shanshui Courtyard now officially belonged to him. He assured Chen Mu that he would no longer disturb his reunion with his friends. Chen Mu calmly waved goodbye and told him to take care. Boss Hu immediately turned around and hurried away from the building. As they watched him leave, Duke William warned Chen Mu that Boss Hu had suffered an enormous loss and would probably not let the matter end so easily. He asked whether Chen Mu wanted him to deal with the man before he could cause any future trouble. However, Chen Mu calmly refused his offer. He explained that there was no need because he had already made the necessary arrangements. Meanwhile, Boss Hu ran desperately through the dark streets. Anger and resentment filled his heart as he thought about everything he had lost. He believed that Duke William might be able to protect Chen Mu temporarily, but he refused to believe that the Duke could remain beside him and protect him forever. Boss Hu clenched his fist in anger and swore that he would definitely take revenge on Chen Mu. However, while he was lost in his furious thoughts, a vehicle suddenly rushed toward him from behind. The car stopped just before hitting him, causing Boss Hu to fall onto the road in shock. Furious, he glared at the driver and demanded to know whether he had eyes or even knew how to drive. Still shaken, Boss Hu immediately tried to take advantage of the situation. He shouted that the driver had frightened him badly and demanded compensation. He declared that the matter would not be settled for anything less than 100,000 ghost coins. Two strange men sat inside the vehicle. Instead of arguing, they calmly told Boss Hu that they would help him settle the matter. Boss Hu immediately became suspicious and demanded to know who they were and who had sent them. The large, muscular man introduced himself as Brother Jie. With a sinister smile, he said that their vehicle was spacious and invited Boss Hu to climb inside and take a seat. Before Boss Hu could escape, one of the men suddenly grabbed his wrist. Realizing that they had no intention of compensating him, Boss Hu struggled desperately and shouted for them to release him. However, the men ignored his cries and forcibly dragged him into the vehicle. Boss Hu continued shouting in panic, demanding to know what they were doing, but he was unable to break free. The men mocked Boss Hu for foolishly trying to scam their boss. They claimed that they merely wanted to check whether his brain was developing normally. Before Boss Hu could do anything, the vehicle sped away with him trapped inside. Terrified, Boss Hu desperately begged Brother Jay to stop, but his cries were ignored as the vehicle disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, strange purple ghost flames floated throughout Shanshui Courtyard. Chen Mu stood there with Duke William and the red-haired woman when his phone suddenly received a message. Brother Jay informed him that the task had been completed successfully. After reading the message, Chen Mu smiled with satisfaction. He had not expected the three men to work so efficiently. Chen Mu then began planning how to use the newly acquired properties. Out of Shanshui Courtyard's 47 villas, he decided to reserve only 10 for public sale. He planned to keep the remaining 37 villas and use them as gifts to build relationships with other powerful ghosts in the future. Chen Mu then turned toward Duke William and offered him one of the villas. He explained that it was a return gift for taking the time to visit him. However, Duke William appeared surprised by the generous offer and told Chen Mu that accepting such an expensive gift would not be appropriate. Chen Mu smiled and reminded Duke William that their friendship was already strong, so there was no need for him to reject the villa. After considering his words, Duke William finally accepted the gift. He assured Chen Mu that if he ever needed help in the future, he only had to say the word. Chen Mu was pleased with the outcome. With Duke William, a powerful ghost general, supporting and protecting the community, any ghosts who intended to cause trouble would have to carefully reconsider their actions. Chen Mu then turned toward Manager Sun and thanked her for coming as well. Manager Sun politely replied that he was being far too courteous. Since Chen Mu was their most important client, it was only natural for them to show him proper respect. Chen Mu explained that most of the villas in Shanshui Courtyard were still empty shells and needed complete renovation. He instructed Manager Sun to purchase all the necessary construction materials from the depraved mall and prepare a detailed proposal for him in advance. Hearing this, Manager Sun became extremely excited. Renovating all the villas would cost at least several hundred million ghost coins. She could hardly believe that another enormous business opportunity had fallen directly into her hands. Manager Sun assured Chen Mu that he was being far too polite. She promised to prepare a perfect renovation proposal that would guarantee both high quality and affordability. However, Chen Mu calmly told her that money was not an issue. He wanted only the finest and most expensive materials available. Hearing this, Manager Sun immediately agreed and declared that she would begin preparing the proposal at once. Duke William then pointed out that although Chen Mu had received the villas for free, renovating all of them would still cost hundreds of millions of ghost coins. Curious about his intentions, he asked whether Chen Mu planned to sell the remaining properties. Chen Mu immediately denied it. He explained that simply selling the villas would not earn enough money to satisfy him. Instead, Chen Mu planned to use the villas to establish an exclusive high society circle reserved entirely for top-tier ghosts. By gathering powerful ghosts within the same community, he intended to create a valuable network of influence and connections. The Duke questioned whether relying solely on the villas would be enough to make the project successful. Chen calmly explained that the villas were only part of his plan. He also intended to develop the surrounding industries. When everything was ready, he hoped the Duke would help promote the project among the upper-class social circle. Chen believed that the newly promoted noble ghosts would never miss such an excellent opportunity to build connections with those in the upper ranks. After hearing his plan, the Duke smiled confidently and assured Chen that he would handle the promotion. Sometime later, Chen sat inside his office reviewing several documents. While he was focused on his work, someone knocked on the door. His assistant entered and informed him that Manager Sun from the depraved mall had arrived to meet him. Chen calmly instructed her to let Manager Sun enter. Manager Sun soon walked into the office accompanied by another woman. She handed Chen a document and explained that it contained the renovation plan they had prepared for him. She asked him to examine it and point out anything that required further improvement. After carefully looking through the proposal, Chen smiled with satisfaction. He told Manager Sun that he was very pleased with the plan and thanked her for all her hard work. Manager Sun smiled and assured Chen that it was no trouble at all. She had only come because there were a few matters she wanted to discuss with him face to face. Chen then asked whether he needed to pay a security deposit before the renovation began. Manager Sun quickly waved her hands and denied it. She explained that they had not yet found a suitable construction team. Since the project involved renovating an entire villa, they could not simply hire random workers who might deceive Chen or perform poor quality work. Chen thought about the problem for a moment. He suggested postponing the villa's handover for several days if they could not complete the renovation on time. At that moment, his blonde assistant offered another solution. She suggested sending some of the cafeteria employees to help with the renovation. Since they were Chen's own employees, he would not need to worry about trusting them. However, Chen felt that the idea was inappropriate. If the cafeteria employees stopped working to renovate the villa, the cafeteria's operations might come to a complete standstill. The blonde assistant smiled and explained that there was no need to stop the cafeteria's work. The employees could simply use the 4 hours of rest they received every day to help with the renovation. Manager Sun was shocked by the suggestion. She exclaimed that giving the employees 4 hours of rest each day was far too generous. Her mall required its workers to remain on standby 24 hours a day. Chen hesitated after hearing this. He had already promised his employees proper rest, so suddenly taking it away did not feel right to him. However, the blonde assistant saw no problem with it. She casually explained that overtime pay did not exist in the ghost world. Chen finally gave in and agreed to follow their suggestion. However, he made one condition very clear. If the cafeteria employees were going to spend 4 of their rest hours helping with the renovation, then those 4 hours had to be treated as overtime and they had to be paid triple wages as compensation. The blonde woman was immediately shocked by his demand. She insisted that they could not accept such money and argued that, in the ghost world, there was no such thing as overtime pay. Chen, however, did not back down at all. In a firm and domineering tone, he declared that his rules were absolute. He said overtime pay could not be reduced under any circumstances, and if they were unwilling to accept that condition, then they should not do the work at all. Hearing his unwavering stance, the blonde woman quickly lowered her head and apologized. She said she understood and promised to make the arrangements right away. As she left, Manager Sun silently watched Chen with shining eyes. His forceful and decisive attitude made her admire him even more, and she secretly found his domineering side very attractive. After that, Chen turned to Manager Sun and instructed her to purchase the renovation materials according to the plan. Manager Sun immediately agreed and confidently assured him that the villa would be decorated beautifully. Chen smiled and thanked them for all their hard work. After that, the scene shifted to the midnight cafeteria. the blonde manager entered the dining area where many employees were gathered and announced that the boss had new instructions for everyone. The workers immediately became attentive and eagerly urged her to speak quickly. She then explained that the Shanshui courtyard Chen had just purchased was currently short on manpower for renovations. Because of that, he needed the cafeteria staff to use their rest time to help with the renovation work. Instead of complaining, the employees became overjoyed after hearing this. One of them excitedly declared that they had finally been given a chance to repay the boss. Others were just as enthusiastic, saying it felt like heaven had finally opened its eyes and given them an opportunity to return Chen's kindness. They were thrilled that they could finally work overtime for the boss and help him directly. The blonde manager quickly warned the cafeteria staff not to celebrate too soon. She explained that Chen had specifically ordered that everyone who went to help with the renovation would receive triple overtime pay. The moment the workers heard this, their excitement vanished and they were left in shock. One employee cried out in despair, saying he had only wanted a chance to work overtime for the boss, so being forced to accept overtime pay felt more like a punishment than a reward. The others also became uneasy. Some worried that by accepting such generous treatment, they would simply be freeloading off Chen. Others feared that if he kept giving them so many benefits, he might eventually go bankrupt. Seeing everyone's reaction, the red-haired chef stood up and asked them all to think carefully about one question. How had the boss treated them all this time? Another worker immediately answered that Chen had treated them so well that words could not even describe it. The others quickly agreed. One of them pointed out that Chen was still in the most difficult stage of starting up his business, yet he was still willing to improve their benefits. Another worker became so emotional that he said if he truly accepted such overtime pay, he would no longer be able to face the elders and the people of the ghost world with a clear conscience. Finally, the red-haired chef raised his voice and asked what they should do. In response, the entire group shouted in unison that they should work unpaid overtime. Before leaving to work overtime, one of the chefs said they needed to make sure everyone followed the same story. The others looked at him in confusion and asked what he meant. The chef then revealed his plan. Everyone who went to the Shanshui courtyard had to avoid registering their names on the overtime timesheet. That way there would be no official record of their extra work, and Chen would not be able to pay them overtime wages. The employees immediately praised the idea. They believed it was the perfect way to help Chen without receiving the additional payment he had insisted on giving them. Seeing their determination, the blonde manager became deeply moved. She could hardly believe that the employees possessed such a strong sense of responsibility and awareness. She then ordered everyone to leave for the Shanshui courtyard immediately and help reduce their boss's burden. The workers rushed out of the cafeteria with great excitement, happily singing about how much they loved working overtime. When Chen Mu arrived at the Shanshui courtyard, he was surprised to see how much progress the workers had made. They had completed several days' worth of work in only a few hours. Looking at the busy employees, he silently admitted that this was truly the power of money. The workers continued renovating the villa with great enthusiasm. Some repaired the floor, while others carried materials and installed decorations. Chen Mu smiled and thanked everyone for their hard work. One of the workers immediately assured him that the work was not difficult at all. Another confidently promised that even though they were working overtime for free, they would still guarantee both the quality and quantity of their work. The moment those words left his mouth, the other workers froze. One of them angrily grabbed Ao Bin and reminded him that they had agreed to hide the truth from their boss. He even threatened that if Ao Bin could not control his mouth, he should give it to someone who needed it more. Ao Bin became nervous and admitted that he had accidentally spoken without thinking. Chen Mu's expression immediately darkened after hearing that they had been working overtime for free. He demanded a reasonable explanation. In his mind, he firmly believed that he could not allow employees to secretly disobey his orders in his own business. The frightened workers gathered together and begged him for mercy, insisting that they had not done it intentionally. Chen Mu sternly told them that although they had volunteered to work without payment, rules were still rules and had to be followed strictly. He immediately called Manager Li and instructed her to carefully check every employee's attendance record from then on. No one working overtime would be allowed to miss or skip punching their attendance card. He then informed the workers that Manager Li would compensate them for all their overtime wages. He decided not to pursue the matter any further this time, but warned them that if it happened again they would be punished. The workers lowered their heads in disappointment. One of them quickly tried to calm Chen Mu and informed him that his bedroom had already been renovated. He suggested that Chen Mu take a look at it. Chen Mu agreed and entered the bedroom. After observing the elegant furniture, decorations, and spotless interior, his anger gradually faded. He looked around the beautifully renovated room and admitted that it was not bad. The muscular worker informed Chen Mu that, according to their planned schedule, they would completely finish decorating the villa within 2 days. Chen Mu acknowledged their enthusiasm but firmly warned them that although they could remain passionate about their work, they were not allowed to break his rules. The worker confidently assured Chen Mu that he would personally supervise everyone, so there would be no further problems with attendance. Since it was already late, he then suggested that Chen Mu return home and rest early. Chen Mu smiled and remarked that he had not expected the worker to be so clever. The worker laughed and explained that, in their eyes, their boss's health was far more important than their wages. Later, inside the midnight cafeteria's office, Manager Lee reported that she had already distributed the overtime pay to all the employees who had secretly worked overtime the previous day. Chen Mu examined the attendance list and saw that A.G., A.Wei, and A.Bin had each worked 16 hours of overtime, while another employee had worked 14 hours. Chen Mu examined the attendance sheet and immediately noticed something suspicious. He turned to Manager Lee and asked whether she was certain there was no hidden trick in the records. Li Xiaoxiao became nervous and struggled to answer. Chen Mu slammed his hand on the desk and angrily called her by name. He warned that if she, as the manager, dared to hide things from him, the other employees in the midnight cafeteria would no longer respect or obey his rules. Li Xiaoxiao quickly bowed and apologized. However, Chen Mu told her that an apology was not the answer he wanted. Under the pressure, she finally admitted that everyone was now clocking in properly according to his instructions. The real problem was that the employees had started arriving earlier than required and leaving much later than they were supposed to. They were still finding ways to work additional hours without officially breaking the attendance rules. Hearing this, Chen Mu became even more frustrated. He considered their actions a form of rebellion. In his opinion, an unhealthy competition had already begun spreading through his business, with every employee trying to work harder and longer than the others. Chen Mu then became worried about their health. He wondered what would happen if someone collapsed because of the intense workload, especially since he had not yet arranged medical insurance for them. Li Xiaoxiao looked confused and asked what medical insurance was. Her question reminded Chen Mu that hospitals capable of treating ghosts were extremely rare. A new idea immediately formed in his mind. If he could purchase a hospital specially designed to treat ghosts, then he would practically hold the lifeline of every ghost living in the city. Chen Mu asked Manager Li where injured ghosts usually went for treatment. Manager Lee explained that ghosts normally bought medicine for minor illnesses, but if their injuries were serious, they could only wait for death. Chen Mu was surprised by her answer. He had heard that the cure rate in ghost hospitals was extremely low, but he still believed they should not completely give up on treatment. Manager Lee shook her head and explained that there were currently no hospitals in Wangjian City that specialized in treating ghosts. Injured ghosts could only travel to a neighboring city for medical care. Not only were the medical expenses extremely high, but the treatment often failed, causing them to lose both their lives and their money. After hearing this, Chen Mu felt that the entire system was practically a scam. He realized that he needed to purchase a hospital as soon as possible. Otherwise, his own employees might eventually be exploited by others when they became injured. Manager Lee smiled and said she understood his concern for them. Chen Mu awkwardly replied that it was good she understood. However, as he thought about the situation, something suddenly felt wrong. In his memories, there was a famous ghost hospital located in Wangjiang City. He wondered whether it had not yet been invaded at this point in time. Chen Mu immediately turned to Manager Li and asked her to confirm once again whether there were truly no hospitals in Wangjiang City that treated ghosts. Manager Li confirmed that there were currently no ghost hospitals in Wangjiang City because they had not received any notification about a new strange scenario descending. Chen Mu then asked whether she could obtain information about newly added strange scenarios as soon as they appeared. Manager Lee confirmed that she could and curiously asked whether he was planning to acquire a new strange scenario. Chen Mu instructed her to arrange for several ghosts to closely monitor the abandoned hospital in the southern suburbs. He ordered them to report to him immediately when the ghost hospital scenario descended. Manager Lee respectfully accepted the order and promised to make the arrangements at once. Deep inside, she became even more impressed by Chen Mu. She believed her boss was truly extraordinary because he could seemingly predict the location of a new scenario before it even appeared. Moment later, front of an old abandoned hospital. After getting out of the car, Chen Mu looked at the gloomy building standing beneath the blood-red sky. The skeletal driver informed him that they had arrived at the Fright Hospital and asked whether Chen Mu needed someone to accompany him. Chen Mu calmly refused and instructed the driver to wait outside for him as usual. Standing before the hospital entrance, Chen Mu realized that the strange scenario he had been waiting for had finally descended. Without hesitation, he walked forward and stepped through the entrance. The moment he entered, a mission notification appeared before him. It revealed that he had entered the strange mission known as the Thriller Hospital. His task was to serve as an intern doctor and successfully complete his internship. Chen Mu immediately felt speechless. He could not believe the hospital expected an ordinary person with no medical knowledge to treat ghosts. At that moment, he finally understood why the hospital had such a low cure rate and such a high mortality rate. As he walked deeper into the dim corridor, he observed the filthy walls, thick cobwebs, and bloody handprints surrounding him. The entire place gave off a dark and terrifying atmosphere. However, Chen Mu was not particularly surprised. By now, he felt that bloody handprints had become a standard feature of every strange scenario. Suddenly, the sound of high heels echoed through the empty hallway. Chen Mu turned toward the approaching footsteps and saw a ghostly nurse walking toward him. She had glowing red eyes and carried a blood-filled syringe in her hand. Stopping in front of him, the nurse asked whether he was the newly arrived intern doctor. Chen Ma calmly confirmed that he was the newly arrived intern doctor. Seeing how relaxed he was, the ghost nurse remarked that he did not seem frightened at all. Chen Ma casually replied that he had already seen too many terrifying things and had simply grown used to them. The nurse became interested in him and told him to follow her. As she walked ahead, Chen Mu briefly stared at her curvy figure. After encountering so many hideously shaped ghosts, he unexpectedly found this nurse quite attractive. He awkwardly wondered whether he had been single for far too long. The nurse led him through the dark hospital corridors until they reached the duty operating room. She stopped at the entrance and announced that they had arrived. The moment Chen Mu entered, he smelled a powerful stench of blood filling the room. Inside stood a bald, middle-aged ghost doctor wearing a white coat and a stethoscope. The nurse introduced him as the chief physician of their department, Director Tong, who had come from the Ghost World's medical school. Director Tong looked at Chen Mu with a faint smile and asked whether he was the newly arrived intern doctor. Chen Mu politely introduced himself to Director Tong. Director Tong handed him a document containing the operating room's rules and regulations and instructed him to read everything carefully before beginning his work. Chen Mu accepted the document and quickly realized that it contained the rules of the strange scenario. The first rule stated that Director Tong possessed excellent medical skills, would never lie, and could always provide the perfect treatment plan. Therefore, Chen Mu had to obey every instruction he gave. The second rule strictly forbade him from leaving the operating room while he was on duty. The third rule required Chen Mu to treat 5 patients and receive at least 3 positive reviews from them. If he failed to collect enough positive reviews, his mission would be considered a failure. The fourth rule warned that some patients had difficult and unstable personalities, so he had to patiently satisfy their demands and avoid receiving negative reviews. After reading everything, Chen Mu calculated that he only needed 3 positive reviews from 5 patients, meaning he could afford to fail twice. However, dealing with unreasonable ghost patients without angering them would still be difficult. The ghost nurse then showed him to a seat and told him to wait there. Chen Mu thanked her before looking around the empty operating room. Confused by the silence, he asked why there were no patients. Director Tong calmly told him not to be impatient. Since it was nighttime, there were naturally fewer patients visiting the hospital. Just then, an injured ghost rushed into the operating room while clutching his bleeding arm. With pain written across his face, he desperately begged the doctors to save him. Director Tong immediately instructed Chen Mu to help the patient onto the bed. Chen Mu quickly stepped forward, supported the injured ghost, and carefully laid him down. the patient continued crying out in pain and urged Chen Mu to treat him quickly. Director Tong then told Chen Mu to use ghost flower oil and cotton balls to disinfect the wound first. Chen Mu calmly agreed and picked up the necessary items from the medical tray. Following Director Tong's instructions, Chen Mu gently cleaned the wound by moving the cotton ball in 3 circles to the left and then 3 circles to the right. He handled the task carefully without causing any unnecessary pain. Director Tong praised him for doing well and explained that all he needed to do next was wrap the injured arm with a bandage. Chen Mu followed his instructions and soon finished treating the patient. However, after completing the treatment, Chen Mu became suspicious. The task had been far easier than he expected, making him feel that there had to be some hidden trick behind it. The injured ghost thanked Dr. Chen Mu and said that he would take his leave. Chen Mu smiled and reminded him to get plenty of rest after returning home. However, the moment the ghost left the operating room, he suddenly ran away at full speed. Watching him disappear down the corridor, Chen Mu jokingly wondered why he was in such a hurry and whether he was rushing to reincarnate. At that moment, a red system notification appeared before Chen Mu. It announced that his first surgery had received a score of only 50 points. The treatment had been judged a failure and the patient had given him a negative review. Chen Mu's eyes widened in confusion. He could not understand why the treatment had failed when he had followed Director Tong's instructions perfectly. Director Tong calmly reassured Chen Mu that there was still a chance. However, Chen Mu soon realized that there seemed to be a problem with the mission's rules. Since Director Tong was supposedly unable to lie, Chen Mu decided to question him directly. Noticing that Chen Mu kept staring at him, Director Tong asked why he was looking at him so strangely. Chen Mu then turned serious and asked Director Tong whether he would only tell the truth, just as the rules stated. Director Tong assured Chen Mu that he would never deceive any intern doctor participating in the mission. Hearing this, Chen Mu immediately asked whether Director Tong was truly highly skilled and masterful in his medical techniques as the rules claimed. Director Tong finally admitted that his medical skills were actually only average. He was surprised that Chen Mu had discovered the false information in the rules so quickly. At that moment, Chen Mu confirmed his suspicion. The strange mission had become more difficult and incorrect rules had begun appearing. The rule requiring him to treat 5 patients was still true, but the claim that Director Tong possessed excellent medical skills was false. Realizing this, Chen Mu understood that he could no longer blindly follow Director Tong's instructions during the upcoming surgeries. Chen Mu tightly gripped the surgical knife as he thought about his situation. He only had one more chance to fail, so he desperately needed to find a way out. After thinking carefully, he suddenly noticed a loophole in the mission's rules. The rules only required him to treat 5 patients, but they never stated where those patients had to come from. Realizing this, Chen Mu immediately took out his phone and searched through his contacts. He decided to call Ah Jae, Ah Wei and Ah Bin, believing that the 3 of them were the most suitable people to handle this matter. Meanwhile, outside Dark Knight High School, Ah Jae, Ah Wei and Ah Bin gathered together beneath the dark red sky. One of them complained that Chen Mu had suddenly ordered them to find 3 patients who could give him positive reviews. He wondered where they could possibly find suitable patients in the middle of the night. Another man agreed, pointing out that there were not many sick ghosts wandering around at such a late hour. However, the third man angrily called them foolish. He explained that if they could not find any patients, they could simply create some themselves. At that moment, a beautiful schoolgirl walked past them. The muscular man with orange hair stared at her with a foolish smile and remarked that she was extremely attractive. His companion immediately became furious and struck him on the back of the head. He scolded him for admiring a beautiful girl while they were supposed to be completing their boss's mission. He then threatened to break the man's arm and send him to Chen Mu as a patient instead. The orange-haired man immediately apologized to his big brother and admitted that he had been wrong. Fearing that his arm would truly be broken, he desperately begged him not to do it. Just then, they noticed an orange-haired man approaching the young ghost girl and blocking her path. With a strange smile, he warned her that it was extremely dangerous for a young ghost like her to wander outside so late at night. Seeing his actions, Ah Jie, Ah Wei and Ah Bin were initially surprised, but they soon understood what he was planning. The 3 of them gathered together and laughed wickedly. They had finally found the 3 patients they needed. At that moment, Ah Jie, Ah Wei and Ah Bin approached the men who were harassing the innocent ghost girl. One of them stepped forward and mockingly asked whether they were truly bullying a young girl in the middle of the night. However, one of the delinquents arrogantly replied that he was doing it simply because he felt like it. Another pink-haired delinquent shamelessly commented on the girl's attractive body. He claimed there was nothing wrong with allowing his big brother to touch her because she would not lose anything from it. The delinquents then demanded that Ah Jae, Ah Wei, and Ah Bin hand over some money before their big brother became angry. They promised to consider the matter settled once they were paid. Hearing their demand, the black-haired man calmly replied that he truly did have something he wanted to give them. The black-haired man suddenly punched the pink-haired delinquent and declared that he wanted to send him to the afterlife. The other two men also attacked without hesitation, easily knocking all three delinquents to the ground. They coldly asked whether the delinquents still dared to act arrogantly. The three injured delinquents lay helplessly on the roadside. One cried that his face had been ruined, another complained that his leg was broken, while the third groaned that his ribs had been fractured. After seeing the delinquents defeated, the young ghost girl bowed gratefully and praised the three men as the great heroes of Dark Knight High School. Her words made them extremely happy, especially because such a beautiful ghost had personally praised them. One of the men proudly remarked that she had truly called them heroes. The black-haired man then grabbed one of the injured delinquents and threw him into a van. However, he decided that sending all three patients to Chen Mu at the same time would look too suspicious. He ordered the others to deliver the first patient before bringing the remaining two later. His companions agreed, saying that they would follow their big brother's plan and make sure not to delay their boss's mission. The van quickly drove through the dark city and soon arrived outside the hospital where Chen Mu was completing his mission. After arriving at the hospital, the black-haired man opened the van door and looked at the three injured delinquents sitting inside. He pointed toward one of them and ordered him to come along. The chosen delinquent immediately panicked and refused to enter the hospital. He claimed that 9.5 out of every 10 patients who received treatment there died, so he desperately did not want to go inside. The black-haired man grabbed him and warned him to carefully remember everything he was about to say. Otherwise, even if the delinquent survived the treatment, he would personally make him disappear afterward. He ordered the terrified delinquent to find a doctor named Chen Mu after entering the hospital and receive treatment from him. Once the treatment was finished, he had to give Chen Mu a positive review. To persuade him further, the black-haired man showed him a stack of ghost money and promised that it would belong to him after he left a good review. However, he also warned that he would remain outside the hospital entrance. If the delinquent dared to play any tricks behind his back, that same money would instead be used to hold his funeral banquet at the village entrance. The frightened delinquent immediately nodded and promised that he understood everything. Without giving him another chance to hesitate, the black-haired man kicked him toward the hospital entrance and ordered him to get inside. A short while later, outside the duty operating room, an injured patient anxiously asked where Dr. Chen was. He explained that he had come specifically to find Dr. Chen and receive treatment for his injuries. Chen Mu sat quietly beside Director Tong. After seeing the patient, he was impressed by Ah Jae's efficiency. Ah Jae had managed to find a patient for him in less than an hour. Meanwhile, Director Tong was surprised that someone had actually come to the hospital and specifically requested treatment from Chen Mu. Seeing the shocked expression on Director Tong's face, Chen Mu smiled and thought that it was all possible because of his cash ability. Chen Mu then stepped forward and politely introduced himself as the intern doctor, Chen Mu. The patient was stunned when he learned Chen Mu's identity. He had assumed that someone capable of commanding a ghost captain-level subordinate would at least be a powerful ghost general. He could not believe that Chen Mu was merely an ordinary human. The patient immediately changed his attitude and claimed that he had accidentally slipped and fallen face first. Chen Mu calmly told him to lie down on the hospital bed first. Chen Mu explained that he would disinfect the patient's wounds before prescribing some red medicine for him to take home to help with his recovery. The patient quickly nodded and admitted that he should not have been wandering around for no reason. He claimed that he deserved to fall like that and gratefully thanked Chen Mu for personally treating him. Hearing the patient's overly respectful words, Director Tong became speechless and wondered why even doctors had such devoted admirers nowadays. Chen Mo carefully used a pair of forceps to clean the wound on the patient's face. He asked whether it hurt, but the patient immediately assured him that it did not. He even told Chen Mo that the amount of force he was using was perfect. As long as Chen Mo did not damage his brain, he was willing to endure anything. After removing the damaged flesh and completely cleaning the wound, Chen Mu told the patient that he was free to leave. The patient sat up and thanked Chenmu sincerely, claiming that Chenmu was like a second parent to him. At that moment, Chenmu received a perfect score of 100 points for his second surgery, along with another 5-star positive review. Chenmu was pleased by how cooperative the patient had been. He thought that as long as he received 2 more positive reviews, he would be able to clear the mission. Just then, 2 more injured men rushed into the room. They desperately called out to Chenmu and claimed that they had both been struck by a car. They begged him to save them. Director Tong stared at them in disbelief. The previous patient had only just left, yet 2 more people had arrived specifically looking for Chenmu. He began to wonder whether Chenmu had somehow been possessed by a jinx. Chenmu calmly assured the 2 men that there was no problem. Since their injuries appeared more serious, he allowed them to receive treatment first. However, after taking a closer look at one of them, Chenmu's expression changed. He immediately recognized the man as the bastard who had cut off one of his fingers in his previous life. He had never expected to encounter him there. The blonde man lowered his head nervously, unaware that Chenmu had already recognized him. Seeing his face brought back painful memories from Chenmu's previous life. Back then, the blonde man had stood over the injured Chenmu and mocked him for trying to play the hero without understanding his own limits. He cruelly asked Chenmu how it felt to be betrayed by the person he had saved. To escape with his own life, Chenmu's so-called brother had promised to offer Chenmu's index finger to the blonde man as a trophy. Remembering that humiliation, Chenmu covered part of his face and smiled coldly. He silently decided that he would finally take revenge for the finger he had lost in his previous life. The blonde patient trembled after noticing Chenmu's terrifying expression. He could not understand why the doctor suddenly looked so frightening, especially since he did not remember offending him. Chenmu then picked up 2 defibrillator paddles and decided to use them for the treatment. Director Tong stared at him in shock as green electricity crackled violently between the paddles. Holding the electrified equipment in both hands, Chenmu smiled and asked whether the patient was ready to receive treatment. The blonde man immediately panicked. He protested that he had only broken a rib and that such an extreme treatment was completely unnecessary. However, Chenmu leaned closer with a sinister smile and coldly asked whether the patient was trying to teach him how to do his job. The blonde patient immediately shook his head and nervously assured Chenmu that he would never dare to question his medical methods. Without hesitation, Chenmu pressed the electrified paddles against his body, sending powerful green currents surging through him. The blonde man screamed in agony as his entire body violently convulsed. Chenmu calmly warned him that the voltage was slightly high and told him to endure it. After the electricity stopped, the badly burned patient weakly claimed that he had been cured. However, Chenmu wondered why the man had suddenly started speaking nonsense. Believing that the electrical power had not been strong enough, Chenmu raised the paddles and shocked him once again. The blonde man screamed even louder as green lightning consumed his entire body. His companion watched in terror and thought that Chenmu was far too ruthless, as the blonde man had almost been burned to a crisp. Moments later, the blonde patient sat up briefly before collapsing onto the bed. His soul then left his body, confirming that he had died. Chenmu turned toward the remaining patient and calmly explained that his brother's condition had been too severe and that he appeared to have died. Instead of mourning him, the frightened man immediately realized that the dead patient could no longer leave Chenmu a positive review. He then became even more anxious. He feared that if the 3 powerful men waiting outside discovered what had happened, they would punish him as well. The remaining patient realized that reviving his brother was the only way to save his own life. Director Tong noticed his determined expression and worried that the man might be planning to settle the score with Chenmu. However, instead of attacking Chenmu, the patient suddenly grabbed the defibrillator paddles from his hands. He scolded his brother for being too mischievous and accused him of pretending to be dead during Chenmu's treatment. His strange words left Chenmu confused. The patient then pressed the paddles against his brother's chest and desperately ordered him to wake up. He declared that if his brother truly died, he would not continue living either. Green electricity surged through the blonde man's body as the patient repeatedly tried to revive him. After witnessing this scene, Director Tong finally understood the situation. He became deeply moved by what he believed was a sincere bond between the 2 brothers. Suddenly, a powerful wave of energy burst from the blonde man's body. A moment later, he cried out in pain and unexpectedly opened his eyes. Although it appeared to be nothing more than a final moment of lucidity, the blonde man suddenly sat up and anxiously asked whether he was still alive. Everyone in the operating room stared at him in disbelief. Seeing that his brother had truly awakened, the other patient burst into tears and happily called out to him. Director Tong stared at the revived patient in disbelief and declared that his survival was nothing short of a medical miracle. However, the younger brother cared more about completing the mission. He rushed toward the blonde man and urgently told him to give Dr. Chen a positive review. Grabbing his brother by the shoulders, he warned him that he could breathe his last only after submitting the review. Still dizzy and barely conscious, the blonde man weakly agreed. A moment later, Chen Mu received confirmation that his third surgery had earned 100 points and another 5-star positive review. Chen Mu smiled and informed the younger brother that his brother's positive review had been successfully received. Hearing this, the younger brother cheered excitedly and immediately let go of the blonde man, causing him to collapse onto the bed once again. Director Tong watched the entire scene in complete confusion. He could not understand who Chen Mu truly was, as it seemed that positive reviews came to him as easily as if they were free. Chen Mu placed a hand on the remaining patient's shoulder and told him that it was time to treat his injured leg. The patient immediately became nervous. He explained that his leg was only fractured and anxiously asked whether Chen Mu would use the defibrillator on him as well. Chen Mu smiled and replied that it would depend entirely on the patient's performance. Hearing this, the frightened patient immediately assured him that he would cooperate completely. He quickly climbed onto the hospital bed and told Chen Mu that he could use any treatment method he wanted, as long as he was left with enough strength to give a positive review afterward. After examining the injury, Chen Mu stated that the fracture in the patient's leg was quite severe. The patient hurriedly agreed and claimed that it was extremely painful. However, Chen Mu honestly admitted that he was not very skilled at performing surgery. Instead of becoming angry, the patient grabbed Chen Mu's arm and insisted that it was not the doctor's fault. He blamed himself for suffering from an injury that Chen Mu did not know how to treat. Seeing how desperate and cooperative the patient was, Chen Mu finally agreed to begin by disinfecting the wound. As Chen Mu cleaned the wound on the patient's injured leg, the man excitedly praised him as a miracle doctor and claimed that he could finally feel his leg again. Seeing how actively the patient cooperated with everything, Chen Mu realized that he was probably another actor Aji had found. After removing the damaged flesh, Chen Mu placed the forceps aside and explained that he had done everything he could. The patient immediately jumped down from the hospital bed and happily announced that he had been completely cured. Chen Mu looked at him suspiciously and asked whether he was truly all right. He even offered to place a cast around the injured leg, but the patient quickly refused and insisted that the current treatment was already perfect. To prove that he had recovered, the patient began moving around wildly and even performed handstands across the operating room. He excitedly claimed that he could already run again before quickly heading toward the exit. Chen Mu called after him and asked whether he was really planning to leave his injured elder brother behind. However, the patient ignored him and hurriedly escaped from the room. At that moment, Chen Mu received confirmation that his fourth surgery had earned 100 points and another 5-star positive review.